I'm going to call to order the Malibu Planning Commission regular meeting for Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. Before we begin the meeting, I'm going to read the standard announcement. This meeting is being held by teleconference due to COVID-19 pandemic. We appreciate everyone's patience as we navigate the Zoom meeting process. Malibu Planning Commissioners and city staff are participating from remote locations, and all votes will be taken by roll call. Members of the public can participate in the meeting or watch it by going to malibucity.org/virtual meeting. At this screen, you will click on a tab to either just watch the meeting or sign up to speak on a particular item. You will only be able to speak during the meeting if you follow the instructions on the screen under the sign up and speak tab. Once the meeting is called, no further signups will be allowed. Once the item is called, I'm sorry. So please make sure the malibucity.org virtual meeting early and download the Zoom application and sign up to speak. The recording secretary will call on those who have signed up to speak when the item is called, so you must be present at the Zoom meeting to be recognized. The applicant team public meeting will have a total of 15 minutes to speak, including any rebuttal time. Members of the public will be afforded 3 minutes only. No additional time is allowed to be donated to another speaker. Commissioners, if you have comments to make during the meeting, please raise your hand and I will call on you in turn to make our discussion clear in the record public. I'd like to also add that several items apparently are going to be continued. So if you have an item you wish to speak on, do not count on the timing without taking those into consideration. So please stay online if you wish to speak. Okay, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Jennings,
Here.
Commissioner Euring,
Here.
Commissioner Weil,
Here.
Vice Chair Marks,
Here.
Chair Mazza.
Here,
You have a quorum.
we have a motion to approve the agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda with item, now is Richard still there? Are we going to move item 3B2 to a future meeting, Richard? That was the message I got from you earlier. Richard?
Yes, that is correct. Hopefully you can see me there.
There you go.
Yes, the reason being is that we would add in the additional plans to the notice of decision.
So that's being moved to what date? Is there a date?
We could bring that back to you on October 5th.
Okay, so item 3B or 3B2 is being moved to October 5th. Item 4A is being continued to a date uncertain. Item 5A is being continued to October 5th. And item 5D is being continued to October 5th. And the only other change I want to make in my motion is I'd like to have items 4B, the Gray Fox item, brought up at the very end of the meeting after item 5C, because John's going to have to recuse himself from that item, so we can do that without him here. That's my motion.
I second. I want to clarify, was item 5B continued to 9/21 or 10/5?
Item, which one now?
The last item 5D is continued to 9/21, is that correct?
It can continue to October 5th.
That's at staff's request, so that's a change from the posted agenda.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's my motion, John.
We have a
second. A second.
Maybe a roll call. So we have to take all votes by roll call.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Commissioner Euring,
Yes.
Commissioner Weil,
Yes.
Vice Chair Marks,
Yes.
Chair Mazza.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. We're now to the. We need to report on the posting of the agenda.
The agenda for this meeting was properly posted on August 28th, 2020.
Okay, do we have any written or oral communication with the public?
No one has signed up to speak under 2A.
Okay, commissioner comments? Nobody?
I got nothing.
What, do you have one, Steve?
No, I got nothing at the moment.
Okay, I'd just like to comment on, very briefly on the staff report for Monday's city council meeting on short-term rentals. To say that I was disappointed that the staff basically is not going to recommend quite a few of our changes, namely guest houses, following council policy 43, multifamily percentages, and the tightening of the revocation laws that David Wylett suggested. I thought they were all well thought out, and I hope the council will consider them. Okay, we're going to move on to.
Just a second, John, I did have two questions just for commissioner comments. I wanted to just get a clarification from item 5B last session. There was a talk that kind of at the time, it didn't really hit me, but I'm thinking back. There was a request of the appellants to that case to move the kind of the second story over the basement, but in the guidance was that it wasn't treated as a basement, it was treated as a first floor. Was that section a first floor or a basement? Because if it's a first floor, the TDSF seems like it was off and it should be treated as a CDP. So I just wanted to just know how that kind of lowest story was treated on that section of that structure.
Yeah, Chris, I'm not sure I know what you're talking about. Can you give me a little more detail on what?
Yeah, it's just because after we had talked that one through, I focused so much on the appellant's view issues, and I didn't think too much about kind of the argument that was given. The appellant had asked that the applicant move their second story so the mass was where it had been originally.
Okay, that was the like for like rebuild where they switched the house over. I know.
Correct.
Okay, I know where you are now. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, sorry. And so I'll just repeat the question that the guidance was that they could not move that mass to match where the mass was before because that would make it 3 stories. But I thought the first story of 3 was a basement. So it's either a first story or a basement. And if it's a first story, then their TDSF was over the 10%. And so shouldn't it be a CDP then? It didn't, like, we didn't really get a chance to bring that one up in the public comment. And I didn't want to try to have some ex parte with someone because I know kind of where that stands. So I just wanted to clarify.
Well, Chris,
what that's being treated as is that kind of first story. Yeah.
it was treated as a floor, but I don't know about the math on the 10%.
Richard,
Let me do you a favor. That project is being appealed to the city council. I think the people who were, yeah, I mean, that's my understanding. So that will get another hearing back up at the.
Well, and I know when John brought up something like this in a public comment, he wasn't able to hear it if it came back to planning commission. So I wasn't sure kind of because of the fact this one's still kind of in the process, I wasn't sure how to bring this question up. So I thought this was kind of the safest place to ask the question without risk of having to recuse myself for some, like off the record discussion on this, so I just wanted to know kind of how that was treated, if we had any clarification on that, or if we could talk about that next time, I'm fine. But that was one question that came up kind of after the fact on that.
Richard, can you answer that one?
So the square footage was counted, so it doesn't kick it over the 10% because there was a garage before above grade. Now it just got shifted below grade. And the reason why it was a first floor was because it daylighted more than 3 feet. If they would have been able to, and it could be a money issue with grading. It could also be an issue where the driveway would have become too steep had it gone deeper, but essentially it needed to go deeper in order for it to be considered a
A
true
basement.
subterranean garage basement, and then you could have put 2 floors above.
Okay, and so that square footage was treated as a first floor, included in all the calcs, therefore it met that modified like for like, as the term was in the staff report.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thanks, because that was, it was ringing in my head. And then another one, just observation from that same meeting. I'm looking more for kind of input or guidance from the other commissioners. I know we talked a lot about our perception of what was happening on that site, and I think it would have been valuable to have asked for more input from the applicant, the appellant, in real time. Any thoughts or guidance on that? Does that lead to any risk if we get one point, but there's no ability to bring a counterpoint up, or is that? I know we talked about being able to have a vote on that. I guess to John as chair, how would you want to manage that in the future if, say, I want to bring up someone's opinion?
It's my opinion that in the past, we've always allowed commissioners to question anybody in the audience. In this case, Trevor will have to weigh in on this rule about you can't speak twice, but I think I have the right to allow you, Chris, to ask somebody a question if they're still online.
The question is after the public hearing is closed, if you had a question for someone in the audience?
Yeah, in the
Or
use
the
case.
Zoom virtual audience we have?
Exactly.
Okay.
And the case being, since we talked at length on that, and obviously the applicant and the appellant have a lot more rich knowledge of that site, I think that would have been helpful.
Okay, so if you have those questions, it's at the discretion of the chair. So you would ask the chair for permission to ask a question of someone after the public comments closed. That would be okay.
Okay, great. That was it. Thank you.
Let me,
Jeff?
yeah, I think we want to be careful to distinguish between asking a question. In other words, where was that tree originally? And the question of, so how do you feel about that?
Agreed.
Once you open up and allow additional testimony from one side, then you have to allow additional testimony from the other side. So if there's specific questions, I think traditionally we get away with that if there are specific questions, but not an open-ended, so how do you feel about that? That's
Agreed. Yeah, because it was that angle. Was it this angle or that angle? It was very specific. So yeah, thank you for that guidance.
Okay, does anybody have anything else? Okay, now we'll have Bonnie's comments, if you have any.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I just wanted to make a few quick announcements of some upcoming items that might be of interest to the commissioners and the public. This week on Thursday, the Coastal Commission will be considering a staff request by the Coastal Commission staff to grant an extension in the processing of the city's LCP amendment related to pesticides. This is a standard thing that the commission staff does when they need a little more time or want more time to work on an amendment. And so that's what's happening here. They, in a phone call last week, they indicated to us that they wanted to work with us on some wording for the amendment, some changes that would be mutually agreeable so that we could make the certification process smoother. So they indicated they did not expect that to be extended for the full, or to take the full year that they're asking for to bring that back. But that is coming up on this Thursday. It'll be a virtual meeting. At the city council meeting on Monday, as Commissioner Chair Mazza mentioned, the city council will be talking about short-term rentals. They're going to be looking at the Santa Monica style ordinance, an enforcement focused ordinance, and then also the same version of the ordinance that they discussed at their August 14th meeting. So that'll be next Monday. And then also on that agenda is an urgency ordinance dealing with sign code provisions that are intended to help businesses and other organizations that need to communicate more easily with the public about changing operational issues and things like that. For example, that would allow them to get a permit to, this is just to initiate this ordinance. It would come back from the back to the city council, but no, it's not. It's actually, I think the ordinance itself is before the council, sorry. So somebody could apply, a business or an organization could apply to put up a portable sign, for example, a sandwich board or something like that, so that the public would know that they're open or what their operating requirements are, things like that. So that'll be Monday also. And then on your, just a heads up, we'll be putting out the next Planning Commission meeting packet this week for the September 21st meeting. And one of the items that will be on that agenda is an item that Zeracis looked at recently. This is the amendments to allow parking as a standalone use. So we'll be bringing that to you in 2 weeks. And that's all that I have.
Steve?
Yeah, Bonnie, a couple quick ones. There was a plan to meet with the Coastal Commission to talk about the ordinance that the Planning Commission had dealt with, that mirrored the Santa Monica process. And I think the question was, how fast would the Coastal Commission be able to get to that? You have any flavor for that?
We did have a phone call with them and discussed what the ordinance was looking like. They didn't give us a real good indication of timing on that.
Okay. I want to go back to John's statement, and I have not read the entire ordinance coming in front of the city council, but is John correct that you guys basically ignored some of the stuff that the Planning Commission came up with? And if you did that, who made that decision?
So this has been as it has been all along, kind of a multi-departmental effort. We've been working closely with the city attorney's office and planning staff has on putting this ordinance together. And I think ignoring is not how I would characterize it. For example, with the guest house provision, essentially we decided to leave it in there and identified it as something that the Planning Commission recommended against, and then the City Council can choose which direction they wish to go. I believe that we kept the enhanced revocation recommendations where, for example, if it was originally drafted as more than 2 citations, blah, 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 then your permit could be revoked. We changed it to I think the commission had said, instead of making it 3, then make it 2. So we did incorporate those changes. I've forgotten now what Commissioner Mazza, Chair Mazza said, what the other one was that he mentioned as an example, but we identified all of the commission's recommendations. We implemented many of them, and there are a couple that we left in place as we had originally proposed them so that the council could choose. Oh, policy 43, that's the one that he mentioned. My opinion is that is an important tool and mechanism for the way that code enforcement operates. So if the council wants to do something different, they can certainly do that. But we did recite all of the Planning Commission's recommendations so that the council would be aware.
Okay, but the person, the think tank that says we're not going to include this, we're not going to recommend we do this, is because what the Planning Commission recommends. Who does that? Who is that think group that says we're going to keep this one out and tell them not to follow that idea? And who just makes those decisions? I'm just wondering how that process works.
Again, this has been a collaboration between me, my department, and the city attorney's office, and then it goes.
Are they Trevor or Christy Hogan?
We've worked closely with Trevor, and Christy's had some input on various parts of the ordinance too. She's aware. Trevor keeps her briefed on everything.
Okay,
I'm not sure what you're looking for.
I'm just trying to figure out, somebody's making decisions that say we vote on stuff, and somebody says, well, we're not going to move them forward. I'm just wondering who those people are, just so I get smarter in that process.
It's my department, and when working closely with Trevor.
City Council. Gotcha. Last question. When I look at the ordinance as it's presented to at least the quick review I did, there's nothing in there that talks about compliance, that talks about how many people we're going to need to do that, how we're going to get those people, what their jobs. How come there's nothing about compliance included in the ordinance? Because having an ordinance without compliance just doesn't seem to make a whole bunch of sense to me.
There's discussion about what the next steps will need to be. It's at the end of the staff report. This process has a ways to go before it's going to be fully functional as far as at least the Santa Monica style ordinance. So
But
more,
even the ordinance, the compliance ordinance needs enforcement, needs somebody to hold everybody's feet to the fire. There's nothing in there on that.
we have a code enforcement group and we have host compliance currently under contract. There's some question about whether we'll continue with host compliance or not. There's not a answer that I'm aware of on that issue. So that we're going to work closely with the sheriff. So those details will be worked out as things are put in place.
But when do you think that would happen? Because if you're going to pass an ordinance without compliance, you might as well not pass the ordinance. When does the enforcement discussion take place and become effective?
The enforcement discussions have been taking place already, and as soon as there's an ordinance adopted, they will speed up and move into action because we will finally have some tools to use. We've been talking about this, as you know, for probably going on 4 years.
I understand the talking process. What I'm concerned with is as I sit here today and listen to the people who are complaining, there is no enforcement. Right? I mean, Doug knows people aren't around on weekends when most of the stuff takes place. People call the sheriff. If the sheriff's out dealing with somebody robbing someplace, they can't come take. I mean, if we're going to do something, we should have the ability to enforce it.
There is the ability to enforce it. Doug is working through the weekends on making contact and running interference between the people that are having issues and the sheriff's department. So it's mischaracterizing it. It's been a very intractable problem for sure, but to say that there's no enforcement is not accurate. So
that's pretty close, but go ahead. I'm done. That's John, back to you.
Okay, I have a couple quick questions. First, Trevor, on policy 43. It's my understanding now it's interpreted that the complainant's name is not given out to whoever they're complaining against. Is that true?
It depends on what the exact situation, but in a number of situations, while the case is still active, it won't be disclosed until the case is closed to avoid any type of intimidation or those types of situations, but it would eventually become a record.
So, for example, if you were in a 4-unit building and you were a tenant and you turned in your landlord or one of his short-term rentals, eventually he'd find out you turned him in. Is that right?
Yeah, you should assume that your name could come out at some point.
Okay. Okay, Bonnie, I have a couple of questions. Thursday, you say the Coastal Commission is going to consider the poison. Was it the poison on Thursday?
it's the pesticide ban.
Right. Now, does this new statewide ban that just passed, is that going to affect that discussion?
The only thing before the Coastal Commission on Thursday is whether to extend the amount of time they have to process the amendment. So I don't think I wouldn't expect it to affect the discussion on Thursday, but who knows, it could get brought up.
Okay, and then the sign ordinance. Orange County just opened up yesterday and other counties are opening up. So as I understand the sign ordinance and the outside seating ordinance, they go away when the county opens up for internal business?
It's tied to the emergency declaration. So it'll depend on that, what the state of the health orders are and the situation locally.
So it could possibly be obsolete before it's passed. Say they opened up next week.
If in restaurant dining were completely open in Malibu, then the emergency, I forget what the exact wording is, but if the emergency goes away, then yes, that the two ordinances are designed to go away when the emergency is over.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions of Bonnie? Nope. So we're going to close that section and We're now on to the consent calendar. Let's see, we continued 3B2, is that correct?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
is anybody pulling 3B1?
I had a question I just wanted to bring up. I don't know if we need to pull it. What would be any preference to go through the formality, or should I just ask a question?
You can just ask a question.
Okay, so I saw the reasons called out. COVID-19 as part of the reason for the extension. Do we have any sense of should we kind of, as a planning commission staff, what have you, be trying to figure out like a position on this? Do we think that COVID itself could come up as a reason for extensions? I'm not calling out this particular applicant because they had other reasons, but do we have any sense of how big this could be as far as an impact to extensions?
My sense is that it's really a case by case thing. As we all know, locally, construction has continued, and many architects and people have continued working. But on an individual property owner basis, many individuals have been furloughed and things like that. So I think the circumstances are really going to vary.
Yeah. Okay. And you're not seeing some big wave of a bunch of extensions coming because of this. That's kind of you're seeing in the pipe. Okay.
Not so far.
Okay, that was all I had on that one. Otherwise, no other questions.
Do we receive and file 3B1? Do we need to vote on that?
Yeah, that's a motion. That's not a receiving file. So I'll move staff recommendation on 3B1.
And do we need to ask if there's any public comment on that? I mean, do we need to ask that formally, or that's just?
No one's asked to have
Okay.
anything pulled, so thank you.
Great. Okay.
I'll second Jeff's motion.
Okay, can we call the roll?
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Commissioner Euring,
Yes.
Commissioner Weil,
Yes.
Vice Chair Marks,
Yes.
Chair Mazza,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay. Am I correct that our next item is 5B?
I think so.
Okay.
I had 4B also. Did that get pushed?
4B
No,
is
4B.
4B
Oh,
is
we're gonna push that to the end. Yeah, sorry, my bad.
okay. So we're opening the hearing on item 5B, which is coastal development permit number 16024, plan site review number 18027, demolition permit number 19022, an application for the demolition and of remainder on-site development and construction of a new one-story single family residence associated development at 22271 Carbon Mesa Drive. Okay, let's have a staff report.
Good evening, Chair Massa and members of the Planning Commission. The next item on the agenda is coastal development permit number 16-024, including site plan review number 18-027 and demolition permit number 19-022 for a project located at 22271 Carbon Mesa Road. Next slide, please. The property is located on the north side of Carbon Mesa Road along the northern edge of the city boundary in the rural residential 10-acre zoning district and is approximately 6.3 acres in size. Next slide, please. The proposed scope of work includes a new 10,350 square foot, one-story, single-family residence not exceeding 18 feet in height with an attached 820 square foot, four-car garage and 992 square foot basement, swimming pool and spa, fire department turnaround and driveway improvements, retaining walls not to exceed 6 feet in height, decks, hardscaping, landscaping, 835 square feet of open air trellises, 976 cubic yards of non-exempt grading, a 5,000 gallon below grade water tank and a 25,000 gallon below grade water tank and an on-site wastewater treatment system. The below ground water tanks will allow the fire department access to the water in case of a fire. Therefore, the accessibility of the water tanks and the location of the proposed project will benefit the surrounding properties as it will serve as a fire break and allow the Los Angeles County Fire Department to fight fires from that particular location. The project also consists of a site plan review number 18-027 for 2,611 cubic yards of remedial grading due to slope failures in 3 locations, and demolition permit number 19-022 to demolish the existing foundation, trash enclosure, swimming pool shell, on-site wastewater treatment system, and front yard gate and walls, which were left behind after the 1993 fire. Next slide, please. The project was scheduled for the August 5th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. Staff requested a continuance of the subject item to allow the applicant time to provide an exhibit depicting existing and proposed fuel modification zones. Staff communicated directly with the Los Angeles County Fire Department Forestry Division and confirmed that the minimum requirement for a fuel modification is 100 feet. With most projects requiring the thinning of vegetation beyond the initial 100 feet up to 200 feet. Traditionally, almost all projects that require a fuel modification plan have been designed to comply with the 200-foot fuel modification area. However, it is the Forestry Division policy to allow a reduction to the standard 200-foot fuel modification in cases where there are important biological resources in an effort to avoid or minimize impacts to significant biological resources. In these communications, it was confirmed that the required fuel modification for the proposed residence has been reduced to 100 feet, where environmentally sensitive habitat area currently exists. Here we have the approved fuel modification plan stamped on March 16, 2020. Next slide, please. Here we just have the site plan. Next slide, please. The project includes site plan review number 18-027 because it proposes remedial grading to reconstruct the slope adjacent to the driveway and adjacent to the required fire department turnaround. The property experienced slope failures in these areas due to the drainage devices that were left unmaintained by the previous owner after the old Topanga fire destroyed the residents and associated development. Those areas are shown on the slide in the blue highlight. So at the top of the image, you have the fire department turnaround area and steep slopes. And then in between that, the driveway, we have those other areas where the remedial grading will be done. Next slide, please. The project includes a basement, which is comprised of 936 square feet plus 56 square feet for the lightware area. Next slide, please. The main floor is comprised of a 10,350 square foot, one-story single-family residence, not exceeding 18 feet in height, with an attached 820 square foot four-car garage for a total of 11,170 square feet. Next slide, please. Here we have story pole pictures taken on Thursday, August 27, 2020, where we can see that the proposed project will be sited completely on the flat, previously disturbed building pad. Next slide, please. In summary, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt resolution number 20-59, approving the proposed project as conditioned. This concludes my presentation. The applicant and staff are available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, can we have disclosures? Who'd like to start? Steve?
Yeah, went up to the property. I had two big questions. One, there is nothing in the staff report that talks about a landscape plan, and I believe that's a requirement. And there's nothing in the staff report that demonstrates a slope analysis. And they're talking about stuff with slopes. So typically I would be able to deal with some of those issues with a site visit. I go up, take a look, see what it looks like, ask it. So I scheduled a site visit and couldn't get on the property. The person who was Vitas, who was, and again, a whole bunch of reasons why that didn't work out, but Vitas didn't show up. I couldn't get on the property, so I had no idea. I couldn't get my questions answered. There's nothing in the staff report today that deals with a site, a slope analysis or a landscape plan. So I'm going to make a motion once we get into this to continue this till some point in time till we can get that information. That's more than you want to know at the moment.
Okay, next,
None for me.
Chris,
None here.
David?
I visited the site. Vitas was there. I walked around, asked him some questions, and then, like everyone else has, I've read all the correspondence that has come in from various neighbors.
Okay, I went up to the site with Steve. We couldn't get into the site since it's locked. I didn't discuss the project with Steve, but I did notice a large water tank on the site, which I Google Earthed, and it is on the site. I couldn't find it in the plans. Also notice there's no grading plan, no landscape plan, no slope analysis. And that's about it. Okay, does anybody have any questions of staff before we go to the hearing? Chris?
Yeah, quick one to DDR. You had mentioned the slope failure kind of to what, the northeast, whatever, of that property. What was the nature of that failure? And why does it need so much grading to address? If
Let
you
me
have
look at-
that.
Yeah, I have it. I mentioned it in my presentation. So the property experienced slope failures in these areas due to drainage devices that were left unmaintained by the previous owner of the old Topanga fire. So those drainage devices were just left alone. The house was destroyed in 1993, and I think over the course of those years, that's what created the.
And so I'm imagining that slope kind of, because it's from the pad, that's a downhill slope off the back of the pad.
That's
Has that
correct.
just been kind of eroding, sliding away? So they're gonna, remove and recompact that to firm it up?
Yes, so the slope is definitely heading down, and the project applicant can elaborate on what they're going to do with that.
Okay, thank you.
David?
Yeah, I guess I'm confused based on what Steve said. If there's going to be a motion to continue this until information is provided in writing that isn't here right now, it does not make sense to me to then get into half a discussion now, then decide to postpone this and do it all over again. If we know ahead of time that this is going to be postponed, then let's postpone it. I just don't see what purpose this is going to serve.
Okay, point taken. Do we have a second? I'll second it for a vote.
But I'm only saying that if it's the intention of Steve and possibly Chris to postpone it.
There is documentation that I believe is required.
I'm not arguing.
Or a landscape plan, and if it's not there, how did this get to this point without that? So I'm going to make a motion to continue it, yes.
But we have to have public first.
I would suggest that you give the applicant a chance to address the issue, and then if you feel that way afterwards. But
He can address it, but unless he's going to show me a landscape plan, I don't know what I'm going to see. Right? He can tell me about it.
You can produce it, or you can explain why it's not required.
No, he can't produce it tonight because we haven't had a chance to look at it. It was supposed to be in the, look, if you go to the plans that the city sent us, it's identified as being in the plans, but it's not there. And if it's not there, I can't review it. And if it's supposed to be there and it isn't, we shouldn't approve this piece of property. So I'm going to go back with David. I mean, as opposed to spending a whole bunch of time playing around with this thing, if we got 3 votes to extend it, let's make the 3 votes and extend it and move on.
Okay, David?
Trevor or Bonnie, in your opinion, is the section of the report that Steve is mentioning necessary to our approval? And is it in fact missing, in your opinion, from the staff report?
The information was provided by the applicant. It just was not attached to, well, it is, let's see, there are grading plans. There are grading plans attached to the packet, and there's a slope analysis
No, there's not.
like, in the packet.
No, there's not.
Which presentation is it, Bonnie? Do you have the number, like A12? It looks like that's the survey.
Looking at the civil plans, there's a field modification plan that's FM3.
8.41 is the landscape plan. There is no 8.41 anywhere in these plans, period. Just not there. And it's supposed to be.
A 4.1, Steve, is what it's supposed to be there?
There's supposed to be.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be a landscape plan, and there's nothing. Look,
There- That part is missing. Yeah, the field
Yeah.
modification plan is different than the landscape plan, and you're right, that is missing. The
So
civil,
it's
the
supposed to be, and we can't approve it without seeing that. I don't think we can. That's a requirement.
Bonnie, would you suggest continuing it or if we need that information?
we inadvertently left it out of the agenda packet, but it was provided. I just wanted to be clear that it's not that the applicant didn't turn it in and that it hasn't been all reviewed. But if the commission wants to postpone this so that they can review the plans themselves, that would be appropriate.
Okay, and I also didn't see a color-coded slope analysis either. So we don't know how to calculate the square footage of the lot. It appears to be very steep, even though I haven't been up there, but the topo lines are real close together. So could I ask one other question before we take a vote? And this, I guess, is to Didier. We've always, as I remember, given a variance to reduce brush clearance requirements. We haven't relied on other agency. It's my understanding that the LCP says 200 feet, you can give a variance for less. In this case, you're saying we're not giving a variance, we're just accepting the word of the forestry department or something?
So in this particular case, this is one of the reasons why we spent a lot of time working on this issue, because in light of the Woolsey fire and just high wildfire danger in general, what appeared to be a reduced field modification zone seemed like something that would typically not be granted. So we did follow up directly with the Forestry Division. It's the Forestry Division who has the jurisdiction over what the appropriate field modification plan should be for any particular project. And they approved the 100 feet of field modification in this case. And, we went back and questioned whether that is standard or not. And they indicated that for most projects, that's actually standard. And there are some projects where they require 200 feet. So this was something kind of different compared to what our typical understanding is. But to speak to the other aspect of your question, the field, what the required field modification is a fire department standard. It's not in the LCP. What you're probably thinking about is when a field modification as required by the fire department would encroach into an ESHA area, then we often will process a variance to allow that encroachment to occur into ESHA. So we're not dealing with a change to the field modification because that's a fire department standard. We're changing the required ESHA buffer through a variance.
So in other words, the planning commission can't go up there and say, hey, this is open brush land and it's X number of feet away. We don't think it's safe.
The requirement for field modification is enforced by the fire department. They're the agency that establishes that and enforces it. So, and it's not in the local coastal program. So I'm not sure the planning commission could override the fire department on that.
Okay, what would you recommend as a continuance date so we can put it in the motion?
I think you could just do this to September 21st.
Okay, is that acceptable for the motioner and the seconder?
It works for me.
How about Chris?
Just one procedural question to Trevor. Do we need to have the public hearing before doing this vote, or can we just jump right to the vote?
We can continue the item.
Okay. That's out.
That's good for, that's a motion to continue to the 21st
Yes,
by Mr. Euring.
yes.
I have a question.
Seconded, did you second it, Chris?
No, David did, I believe.
David, do
Sure,
you accept that motion change to the date?
Question?
No.
Jeff has a question.
Jeff's got a question.
So are you saying that it would be appropriate for us to move to continue this matter, which has been on the agenda, without hearing from the applicant as to the appropriateness of whether continued should be granted or not?
We continued 3B1 for the same reason.
I'm asking Trevor.
You know, you're right. We should let them have a voice as to whether, if there's a reason about the continuance. I mean, it's noticed on the agenda. You know, it's a judgment call, but you know, if you want to open the public hearing, you could, or you could let them speak if there's an issue. You want to give the applicant a chance to speak about the continuance. But if you don't have the information before you, we're not making a decision on the item tonight. We're just continuing to a future date.
They may not care, but it seems to me that in the interest of fairness, you ought to at least have them say, you know what, I've got to go to my mother's funeral next week. I can't be there. I mean, you know, just.
Point
It would be helpful to know if there's some conflict where they couldn't make the next meeting so that we don't do that.
taken, Jeff. We're always fair. Can we ask another thing I'd like to point out, don't laugh. I'd like to also point out that I couldn't find the water tank on any of the plans. So that'd be another thing I'd like to know. Okay, who's the applicant?
Edith,
Vitas. Can we open up Vitas's mic?
We have Vitas Matari and Larry Harris, the owner, as the applicant team. I didn't know if you were going to afford them 15 minutes or just 3 minutes.
Oh, no, this is a question. This is not a
Just
hearing.
question. Okay.
The question is the date acceptable? Do you have any other objections? And we'll open up both mics if you both want to speak.
Yeah, we're not opening the public hearing, but we're allowing comment on the item.
Larry, do we want Larry first?
Yes.
Okay. Larry, could you tell us what your opinion is?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Video's not on, but doesn't matter. Look, if the application's not complete, then you can't form a proper judgment on the application. As a consequence, it would have to be continued. Clearly disappointed. As the fault appears to be with Malibu Planning and not on our end, it's appropriate to do this continuance to the earliest possible date. So the earliest possible date is the meeting that I understand you proposed. I'm available then, and so this works for me.
Vitas, are you?
Yes. I don't know if you can hear me. My mic is unmuted. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
We can.
Okay. Yeah, 21st is absolutely fine. I wanted to stress that we did submit a color-coded slope analysis, and all development is proposed on the flat of the land except for the erosion gullies that are being repaired. Another footnote, the landscape plan was approved by Dave Crawford, was also approved by the Forestry Division, is included in the set. It's called FM3. We didn't want to duplicate the pages, so we were asked to pull up 4.1, whatever they were, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3 were the fuel mod, landscape and water conservation plans that are duplicated as the FM plans. Unfortunately, it appears both set of 3 pages were omitted from your planning set. Obviously, I'll get together with Didier and make sure that everything is in there for next time. And lastly, I received a phone call on the morning of Thursday of last week, letting me know that the 11 a.m. appointment to meet with John and with Steve was canceled, and they requested to move to 2:30. And so I was all set to go for 2:30. I'm so sorry I was not there. I don't know who called and asked me to reschedule that. David also rescheduled. I accommodated David at 1 o'clock, no problem. Canceled a doctor's appointment to be there to meet John and Steve at 2:30. So I'm so sorry I left you guys waiting at the gate, but I understood that you would not be keeping that appointment.
Vitas?
Yes.
That's a different story than we got when I spoke to you. We did not cancel our 11 o'clock. You said that you had mistakenly changed the meeting on your own. So blaming us for not.
I'm not blaming you, Steve. I'm just so sorry. I did not know how that happened. And it's pretty clear to me now that I received 2 calls to reschedule both of those meetings. So if I've made a mistake, I apologize. I'm so sorry I wasn't there.
No
but
problem.
I understood very clearly that one had been moved.
No problem. We'll try and do a site visit before the next meeting.
Let me know what time. It's a priority here. And I promise never to leave you standing at a gate again. It's something I would never want to do.
Thank you very much.
One quick
If Peter's is not available, I can show the site as well.
Okay.
We definitely want you to be as fully informed about this property as you can be.
Okay. Last question, Chris.
Yeah, I just wanted to call out, I'm looking at the plan, I'll get the reference number, but it looks like there's a 5,000 gallon tank that's proposed on your On your plans, I see that on, let me just get the reference. And there are you, I'm assuming you're removing that larger tank. I think it was a 1,000 gallon tank or something it was stated. But FM1 does show the 5,000 gallon tank. Is that correct for another question John had?
Well, there's also a 25,000 gallon tank.
Yes. May I explain what the 3 tanks are for?
I think that would help. So we're ready
Yes,
for next.
I will help everyone understand these plans. There is a 350,000 gallon tank that was installed in 1967. This is when the Malibu Water Company was taken over by County District 29. That tank is to be replaced yet again. Part of our program is to update the driveway for the county for their access. And we'll also in the future at some point, as they decide the shape and size of the new tank, I understand it's to be a 500,000 gallon tank they want to put up there. It'll be partially subgrade. It will replace the 350,000 gallon tank in an effort to provide better firefighting water and pressure for that entire community. So the driveway that we are repairing is not just to access the house, but also give the county the width and the radius that they need to get the old tank out of there in parts and bring in and construct what I understand will be a new concrete tank. We've cooperated with their geologist and their soils engineer on this, and there have been numerous discussions on how to upgrade that tank. That tank does not pertain specifically to the service of our house. There are 2 subgrade tanks to be installed to the north side of the house. One of them is a 5,000 gallon tank. That water will be kept fresh with the irrigation for the new landscaping. Those 5,000 gallons are to be plumbed to a hydrant midway up the driveway. That is for firefighting right on the hill. If that's where they encounter fire, they can hook a hose right to that hydrant. They would only have 5,000 gallons, but it would be all that they need. This was negotiated between Dick Sherman and representatives of the Fire Prevention Bureau. The 25,000 gallon tank is to protect the house. It is to have a mechanical device to read and draft directly from the hydrant at grade. The domestic water is to flow through that tank, and the fire suppression system is also plumbed to that tank. These would be shut off immediately, of course, in the event of a fire, and the fire department needing that for their firefighting capacity right at the house. That's why there's 3 tanks.
Let's, if we can,
Let's do the vote.
Yeah.
first, these items that have just been brought up apparently aren't in the staff report, or I didn't see them. So hopefully when it comes back on the 21st, we know what's going on with the water tanks and whether or not they're included in permeable coverage. So let's have a vote. Can you call a vote, Kathleen?
Can I ask Vitas for one clarification, just so everybody understands? I want to make sure I understand too. Vitas, is did you say that the fuel modification plan FM3 is the same as the landscape plan?
I believe FM3 is the water conservation plan and FM2 would be the landscape plan.
Okay, so when we republish this next with the upcoming packet, nothing's going to change with respect to the landscape plan. That will still be FM2 and FM3. So what we're going to be adding is the color-coded slope analysis.
No.
Plans.
You need to,
On the report, it says FM1. No. A4.1 is the landscape plan. There's no A4.
That's what I'm just, in Vitas's presentation, he said that they decided not to reprint the exact same plan with a different page number on it. So that's why I was asking for clarification.
So it would be what is the identification of the landscape plan?
FM2.
It's not in here either.
It
Yeah,
is.
that's why we're continuing it, Steve.
Yeah, let's just go right. Let's do the vote.
Okay,
Make sure everything's in the next time we go around.
There's only one item missing. That's all I wanted to clarify.
no, I would say that I need a clarification on the water tanks.
Well, that's fine, but that's different than us leaving something out. Okay, go ahead.
Can I just ask that you, I mentioned to you, I think, Bonnie, Vitas, when I was on the site, you mentioned that the house that has been demolished had a much larger, and I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm asking staff to check with you to put it in the report. Was it you mentioned 17,000. I didn't know if that was TVSF. I don't know if that was square footage. I don't know if that was habitable square footage, but the impression that I got was that this new structure is significantly smaller than what it is replacing, which is merely a point of information I'd like clarified. I'm not making anything of that. but I'd just like to understand what that point was.
The rebuild that occurred in around 1976 was for a house around 7,000 to 8,000 square feet. But up through the mid 1980s, they were continually covering porches, patios. There's an interior courtyard that falls within the two-story building that was ultimately covered. There's a attached garage, a pool cabana, converted dog kennels and a tack room, and a very large guest house with an exercise studio below. When we add up everything that we see in the aerial images of this, and based on discussions with people that worked on this property for two of the prior owners, we come up with a number that's substantially larger than what would be allowed under today's planning code. The issue for us is that the LA County Assessor's Office doesn't count these accessory buildings. And they don't always get the addition of other things correctly. So the cabana and the pool house and the exercise studio that were all approved by permit, all had coastal permits, they are not included in those totals, and the coastal permits are just as confusing. So when we tally up everything that was there, we're coming up with 17,000 square feet of covered or enclosed space.
Okay, thank you. That was just, thank you. That answers my question.
Yeah, and it's irrelevant since it was 26 years ago. Okay, can we have Didier?
Yeah, I just wanted a point of clarification because there's some miscommunication with what was included and what wasn't. I just want to make sure that what we clarify is the plan sheet index on the cover sheet of the project plans. It looks like that's mislabeled. So for example, you pointed out the landscaping is sheet A4 point something. So we just need to change that to reflect that the landscape plan is sheet FM1. And then the color-coded slope analysis is that smaller plan that's right next to the plan sheet index. But I suppose that we could just take that and put it in a bigger plan sheet and label it as well.
These are all administrative things yeah, that you guys got to figure out.
Yeah.
Let's. I'm going to call a vote. Can we have Kathleen the roll call, please?
Motion is from Commissioner Euring to continue it to September, is it 21st? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Seconded by Chair Mazza, correct?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I had it David Weil as a seconder, but I can change that.
Well, I think David did eventually second it after we changed it, but
Okay.
you care, David?
I do not care.
Okay, I'll second it. Okay, so let's call the question.
Commissioner Euring,
Yes.
Chair Mazza,
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Commissioner Weil,
Yes.
Vice Chair Marks.
You're muted, Chris.
You're muted, Chris. Chris, you're muted.
All right, sorry about that. Yes.
Okay.
Motion carries.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is
Trancas.
5C.
5C. Now, let me get that, and that'll probably be, okay, coastal development permit number 19-080, variance number 19-058, an application for replacement of a bridge on Pacific Coast Highway that spans Trancas Creek, location between Trancas Canyon Road and Guernsey Avenue in the appealable zone. That was a very short description of a very big staff report. So can we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Chair Mazza.
Wait, let's get to disclosures first. Who would like to start?
None for me.
I've been to Trancas Bridge.
I walked around and took a look recently just to see it again.
Chris?
Nothing additional.
Nothing for me. Okay, let's have a staff report.
Good evening, Chair Mazza and members of the Planning Commission. As discussed, this is for the replacement of the bridge that's along Pacific Coast Highway that crosses over Trancas Creek and leads out towards Zuma Beach and the Pacific Ocean. If I may have the next slide, please. This slide here shows the project area. This is the area that was studied for impacts, or potential impacts, I should say, as part of the initial study that resulted in a mitigated negative declaration for the project. And the different colors here represent the different types of land uses. We have a range of land uses that surround this, from commercial to residential to open space to public open space, such as Zuma Beach. Next slide, please. This is an aerial photo showing the bridge at Trancas Creek, the current bridge, which is proposed to be replaced. The current bridge is just under 100 feet in length. The new bridge will be about 240 feet in length and will extend further eastward, so that is towards Santa Monica, than the existing bridge. And the purpose of that wider span, rather than just replacing this in kind, is because there is talk of a potential project on the former Riders and Roper site, which is just to the inland of the bridge. The potential project there would be undertaken by the National Park Service, and it's a Trancas Lagoon and Creek restoration program. And as part of that, there was a request made to Caltrans by the Park Service that a wider opening be made so that it would make it easier for flows to make their way towards the lagoon. And also when water comes in from the ocean side, it would result to a greater amount of flow for the lagoon restoration program. If I may have the next slide, please. This particular slide is showing Guernsey Avenue. Guernsey right now is not a controlled intersection. There is no traffic control for the east and westbound traffic on Pacific Coast Highway. Those exiting or entering Guernsey do so when there is a break in traffic on Pacific Coast Highway. The project site spans from the western end of the Trancas Canyon Bridge, so that would be the end where there's Trancas Market, and the project area ends to the east at Guernsey. And the reason for this large area is because there will be a temporary traffic signal installed at the intersection of Guernsey and Pacific Coast Highway. And the purpose of that is to allow for pedestrian and bicycle traffic to be able to continue to use the stretch of PCH during construction. As I'll go into further detail in this presentation, essentially what will happen is half of the bridge will be built at a time. And so when you're doing that, you need to move the pedestrian traffic and bicycle traffic onto one side of the highway. So for example, if there is someone was traveling, say, towards Ventura, so westbound on Pacific Coast Highway, and that particular side of the bridge was under construction at that time, one would go to the intersection of Guernsey. At the temporary light there, they would then cross PCH onto the ocean side, travel along the ocean side through the project site, and at the light at Trancas Canyon, they would then be able to cross back and get on to the westbound or Ventura side of the Pacific Coast Highway. So that is the purpose of the temporary signal, as well as the size of the project area. If I may have the next slide, please. This is a picture of the current bridge. There are two abutments and then also the abutments on the end. These currently are facing potential failure from erosion. So years ago, an emergency coastal development permit was issued to allow for temporary shoring to protect these foundations in order to finish the work needed to design and do all the associated studies to bring us the bridge that we have this evening. As part of this coastal development permit, the temporary permit that was issued for these the temporary erosion control measures will be finalized, and we'll be able to close out that permit with this CDP. Next slide, please. This is a elevation showing what the bridge would look like if you were standing at the beach, having the ocean at your back and looking towards the hills. As you can see, there are the new abutments, the new piers that will go in, two abutments at the end, and the area with to the left of the bridge there with a little number 4 on it, above it, that is going to be the new path. There was a request by the public that there be a way for pedestrians and bicycle traffic to cross under the bridge. So from the inland side of the highway to the ocean side of the highway, there was that request, and Caltrans has accommodated that, and right under that area with the circular 4 there, that's going to be a ADA compliant pedestrian path. And that path will actually provide a linkage to an existing trail dedication that was obtained when the Trancas Market was approved by the city. And there is a offer to dedicate that was recorded. It would be just to the inland side of where this path will stop. So it would get picked up there by that path if built by the National Park Service. Next slide, please. In this slide here, you can see the area that is proposed to be restored upon completion of the project. Because there's no way to work on this bridge without actually working in the riparian habitat, a variance has been included. And as a result, upon completion of the project, a habitat restoration plan will be implemented and the area that is disturbed will be restored. Per the city's environmental review board, there was a request that the plants be locally sourced. And as discussed in the staff report, that was included as a condition of approval, and it's something Caltrans could accommodate. There was also discussion that the planting palette should be as close as possible to that of the restoration planting palette used by the National Park Service when they do the restoration project. However, the issue there is that project has not been designed yet. It's still in the design phases. They are working on obtaining the land for one, the funding, and then working on possible designs. So at this point, it's hard to achieve that recommendation, and there is no timeline on the national park project that would give us an estimation of when it would be feasible to even know what their planting palette would be. So these will just be locally sourced native vegetation that would be consistent with what's in the area. Next slide, please. The project will be accomplished in phases. So the first phase will be to essentially shift all of the traffic to one side of the bridge. And so there are 4 lanes of traffic right now on the bridge. The project proposes to maintain 4 lanes during construction. So what they would do is shift all of the traffic to the ocean side of the bridge for the first phase. And then what they would do then is demolish the inland half of the bridge and then work on constructing the new inland half of the bridge. There would be about 10,000 cubic yards of excavation. And the reason for that is that the dirt that is under the existing roadway that is to the east of Trancas Creek needs to be removed. Because once again, we're going from a bridge that's under 100 feet in length to a bridge that's 240 feet in length. So that dirt needs to be excavated and removed from the site. There would still be, as I mentioned earlier, a temporary bike and pedestrian path while this side of the bridge is being constructed. Next slide, please. The second phase would then be to shift the traffic over to the newly constructed inland portion of the bridge, then demolish the ocean half of the bridge, construct that half, and we would see the same work. There would have to be another 10,000 cubic yards of cut taken from under the existing highway. Upon completion of the bridge, then traffic would then shift back to its original northbound and southbound configuration. And you'd have 2 lanes in each direction and you'd have your pedestrian path. That's the scope of work that will be completed by the Caltrans project team. There is additional work that needs to be completed as part of this project. And one of those is there is a water main that runs under the bridge currently. That water main will temporarily be relocated by the Department of LA County's Public Works Department. And the other work that needs to be done by an outside agency is the utilities need to be relocated off of the bridge to a temporary configuration while the new bridge is constructed. If I may have the next slide, please. This is a rendering showing how the bridge will look upon completion. As you can see, there's going to be visually permeable railings. And in addition to that, there would be some finish to the concrete to integrate a wood-like finish to soften the features of the concrete. Next slide, please. This is a view of how the bridge would look if you were standing at, say, the Zuma Beach parking lot looking diagonally across the highway towards the Trancas Country Market. Next slide, please. And this is a view of how the bridge would look if you were to be standing on the bridge, Trinkus Market to your back, looking towards Zuma Beach. Next slide, please. There was an additional request made by the city, and what that request was to include a physical barrier between the pedestrian traffic and the vehicle traffic on the bridge. So in this top-down view of the bridge, the schematic view, what I've done is you can see there's a black rectangle within the red rectangle that I've highlighted. What that is going to be a visually permeable railing like you see in the lower photo, so that instead of just having a white line like you do currently on PCH and the bikes and pedestrians on the other side of that white line, while you're on the bridge, you'll have the white line, but this railing on top of it that provides a physical barrier between the pedestrians and the vehicles traveling. You do not have this site plan in your planning packet, commissioner packets. This plan was just produced earlier today. This was something that the city requested Caltrans add, and Caltrans has accommodated that. So we would be including this as part of the scope of work. I believe it's condition number 2. We would like to modify it to include the inclusion of the physical separation between vehicles and pedestrians on the bridge. Next slide, please. Staff did receive 2 pieces of correspondence on this application. Last week, there was a piece of correspondence that brought up questions of the safety of the slope and the impacts of the temporary traffic signal. A response to that was prepared by the Caltrans staff and distributed for public review. In addition, there was comments distributed today regarding sea level rise. On this application, the applicant can speak to it. The sea level rise study was viewed as part of the initial study. There was further work done after the initial study. In addition, there was discussion of this project with the California Coastal Commission to make sure that the standards being used were appropriate. And to date, there have been no negative comments from the Coastal Commission regarding sea level rise or this project. However, the applicant is familiar with those studies and could also provide further information. Staff recommends adoption of the resolution, which would adopt the initial studies and mitigated declaration, and also recommends approval of the coastal development permit for the proposed project. I'm available for any questions as well as the applicant. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any questions of staff before we go to the applicant? Steve?
Just one quick one. Richard, how long has this project been studied by God knows how many people to make sure we got it right? Any idea?
I would say roughly 4 years.
And primarily, but Caltrans, the Environmental Review Board took a look at it. Anybody else of Coastal Commission took a look at it?
And there were also at least 2 public comment scoping meetings. There was one very early on at the Malibu West Swim Club. That would be around 2016 timeframe. And then there was most recently 2 months ago, a public meeting on this. And they've also been in coordination with, and they can correct me if I missed some of these agencies, but they did work with Beaches and Harbors, Fish and Wildlife, and also the National Park Service.
So a lot of people have looked at this thing.
Yes.
Okay, so that's all I was just, that's it, John.
Okay, I just want to comment on that. I'd like to change my disclosure. I was at the 2016 scoping session. I was not at the later one. I've got a couple questions that, just to get them over with. We all know that the Broad Beach project has been going on for a decade or so. Is there anything in this resolution that would preclude both projects happening at the same time? Which, in my opinion, would be a disaster.
What Broad Beach project are you talking about, John?
Digging out 1,000 feet of rocks and moving them and dumping 40,000 truckloads of sand on the beach.
Gotcha. Okay, go ahead. Got it.
To my knowledge, and our public works director can speak to it as well, there is nothing I'm aware of that would preclude either project from moving forward. I don't believe the two would influence each other.
No, John, that's a very good question, and that's a very big concern that I will have too, raising when they get to that point. I haven't heard any movement on Broad Beach on them moving forward to it, but point taken, and I'll make sure that those two projects kind of coordinate to make sure that there isn't any traffic impact. That's a very, very good question. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks for bringing that up.
Trevor, can I ask you, is there a reason why we could not put a provision in our approval that precludes that from happening?
Precludes what from happening?
The two projects happening at the same time.
It wouldn't be appropriate. This is the conditions that'd be on this project, and there wouldn't be any limitation unless you.
Well, the reason I say so is if you had 40,000 truckloads of dirt moving at the same time they're building a bridge, that would obviously have an effect on their environmental study. I mean, you'd have, I think they counted when they first originally did the environmental study on Broad Beach, they said one truck every 15 minutes for 9 months. It was a big deal. That would invalidate, in my opinion, that would invalidate the EIR.
Well, they already have an approved project there.
No, that's what my point is.
Okay. Well, they're going to have to consider the impacts of any approved project when they go to the environmental on that project. So they're going to have to consider the lay of the land when that comes through separately. But we can't.
Let me ask Bonnie, do they have an approved
Let
project?
me ask you a question. If Broad Beach decides they want to go forward, does the city have any say in that process? Do we have any stroke to say, hold off, or do we just get rolled over if that happens?
I forget if it was Richard or Rob who said it, but I haven't heard anything to indicate that would be moving forward anytime soon. It's the Coastal Commission's coastal development permit. In terms of jurisdiction, they have the jurisdiction over that permit. So I believe there were quite a number of hurdles or hoops that the applicants were still needing to jump through in order to move it forward. But I think it would be just an effort at interagency coordination.
So Steve, here's something we have in our tool bag, is that no matter what they have to do, they have to get an encroachment permit through us to make sure that they're going to be trucking and going through. There's a whole trucking system, there's a whole permit process that we could make sure that we can hold them to make sure there's coordinating. There's not going to be a conflict in either way to make that sure that happens.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Okay, another question, I guess, for Rob. This new barrier between the pedestrians and the roadway will the bikes be riding in the pedestrian lane or in the roadway lane?
So let me give you a little background on this, on how this came up. During our public meeting, had some very good comments and suggestions. I think this came from Hans. He suggested, and I, after he made it, I kind of agreed with him, is have some type of pedestrian walkway from the bridge going over there, because people from Trancas, they cross the intersection and they walk along the beach side to access Zuma Beach. And so he recommended that Caltrans do something to promote pedestrian safety in that section over there. And so what will happen is that this barrier will be just for pedestrians. There'll be a separate bike lane that's going to be in the lane that's not within the barrier section, or it's in that little walkway. So
the bike lane, what happens frequently now is you get packs of 30, 40 bikes.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to take the whole lane. There'll be an actual bike lane plus a real lane, or are they just going to be in the 12-foot lane?
Yeah, they'll be, based on the cross section, they have 2 travel lanes, a bike lane, and then they'll have this pedestrian walkway totally separate than the bike lane and the 2 travel lanes.
So will there be two bike lanes, one on either side?
Correct. At the final the final layout has has a bike lane in each direction.
Okay, great. Now, the lighted Guernsey, the more lights you have on Coast Highway, the worse it is, it appears. Is that light required to be removed? You say it's temporary. Is there something in there that says they can't just leave it there?
Oh, it's so the purpose of that turn signal or that signal there is during their demolition, the first phase is they're gonna demolish one side of the bridge, half of it at a time, and put both traffic eastbound and westbound on one side of the road. And so the signal is going to be accommodate for pedestrian and cyclists to cross the street, cross PCH and enter on that one side of PCH. And so you'll have both north and southbound traffic on PCH on one side. And the signal over at Trancas will allow them to come back into the right section. And so once the temporary signal or the both bridges are put together, that temporary signal will be removed.
Is that required or just supposed?
That's their plan.
Okay, so they would have to go get another permit for a signal if they kept it there.
Correct.
Okay. And then I know the Klein House got turned down by the Coastal Commission. Has the west end of the bridge shifted at all to how it would affect the Klein House on the beach? Is it in the same spot where it starts? Does it look like there was a bunch of riprap put in there instead of straight up? Understand what I'm saying? I just want to see if this affects. There was a big question about the river flowing and changing the Klein House. It wasn't just the ocean. Does this change anything as far as the river flow goes? Or did anybody study the hydrology of the river?
So I'll let Richard answer the first part of it, and then I can do the second part about the hydrology of everything on there. So I'll get to Richard first, and then I'll come back to me.
Okay, great.
From reviewing the plans and speaking with the project team, my understanding is that the abutment on that western end is in the same place.
Okay.
And then to make the trails aligned, they kept everything in line there and expanded out the bridge to get that extra opening. My understanding was it was expanded towards the east.
Okay, great.
In addition, the applicant can speak too for Rob.
So in regards to the hydrology, the applicant Caltrans did submit in a full hydrology report. We reviewed it and we looked at it, and we didn't see any significant impacts or any issues with hydrology in relation to water levels in Malibu Creek, or not Malibu, but Trancas Creek going out. So the applicant can go into more detail on that hydrology report, but we didn't see any significant impacts.
Okay, now, as far as Craig Hill's letter on sea rise, he quoted the Coastal Commission basically from the Klein report, and then apparently this staff report somewhere says they use that as a reference. And when I look at your view of the bridge from the ocean, it looks like in a lot of cases, there is not a berm. Because it's a river, it washes it out to sea. So where the river is actually lower than where the beach is. Are they actually using the same height, or are they adding anything to it since the Coastal Commission turned down the wave uprush on the other house? Now it's directly next to it. Does Craig have a point is what my question is really.
So I can tell you what we did from our standpoint, the Public Works Department, on reviewing it and looking at it. We look at it to see if it meets the FEMA regulations in this situation. I did have a couple of consultations with FEMA to make sure that we're on the same page, and based on their hydrology report and everything they submitted, they're meeting all the required requirements of FEMA. And this, for wave rush, I'm gonna have to pass it over to someone else to kind of pass that. That's out of my toolbox to give you any comments on. So I'll leave it up to either Richard or someone else to kind of do that.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is this bridge is 92 years old, as I understand. So we can expect this bridge to be there for 100 years.
John, I thought the staff report said that somebody the Coastal Commission reviewed this project, right? So they didn't have any problems with it. Is that?
No, maybe they didn't comment. I don't know if they had problems or not. Richard, do you know?
So the Coastal Commission not only received a copy of this report, and also staff discussed the project with them, they were also consulted in the initial study phase of the project. And so they had 3 opportunities to speak. The staff report does not reference the Klein house or that address. That was a conclusion that was drawn outside of the report by the public. What the staff report does say is that when I wrote the report, I quoted what they used for their sea level studies, because one of the questions that comes up quite often at the Planning Commission is, was it a 6-inch scenario, 3-foot scenario? It's a question of what standard was being used. So in the report, we illustrated what standard was being used, which was a 6.8 foot sea level rise scenario. And there was a 1 in 200 chance at that point of impacting the bridge at some point in its lifetime.
Okay, and as I remember, the Klein house was like 2 feet or something. It was a lot different. Okay, that answers that. Chris, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a couple quick ones. First, on the kind of around sea level, the footpath underneath the bridge, it says it has like 8 foot of headroom or something. And you mentioned in your staff report, Richard, that there, there'd be, I think you'd said there'd be signs put up when there, to say, don't go here when there's trouble. Do we have any sense of like how often we'd expect that to be impassable, or, would it be something that's constantly getting kind of mudded up or what have you, based on the difference in height from kind of where the creek bed is expected and where that the actual foot level of the traffic would be, of the foot traffic would be?
Let me call on Trevor now.
Sure, we can answer this one, but can we get the public hearing open? I don't want to get too far into the discussion on here.
That's fine. That's fine.
No, I was just trying to what I was trying to do is get a lot of the questions answered. So
Yeah, more from the staff report directly, but I'm good either way.
Anybody else have any other questions? Okay, let's open up the public hearing. We have the applicant first.
We have the applicant team consisting of Riza Fatah, Barney Voriter, Orlance Lee, Charles Lomica, Robert Wang, Elizabeth Florence, Christopher Stevenson, Osama Assad, Nick Pisano, Ginger Liu, Elisa Amenzon, and then we have 3 members of the public, Chris Frost, Raja Gosnell, and Craig Hill.
Okay.
And I believe Riza Fatah will be beginning.
Yeah, I will leave it up to her to divide it up. Otherwise, they each get 30 seconds. Okay, so Riza.
If you'll bear with me a moment, I just want to make sure the clock gets updated to the 15 minutes. It'll be just a moment. Okay, you may begin.
Thank you very much. My name is Reza Fateh. I'm Caltrans project manager for this Trancas Creek bridge replacement project. Richard did an excellent job of going over the construction staging and the various aspects of this. I'm just going to touch upon some of the areas that probably he missed and we need to really bring it up. And that is, the first one is that this bridge was found to be scour critical, which means essentially the earth material that supports the foundation has been partially washed away, and it has created a potential for the bridge to become unstable. And in order to mitigate that on a temporary basis, Caltrans undertook a placement of rock slope protection around the foundations last year, which should hold up the bridge until it gets replaced sometime next year. If I can have the next slide, the next one. I'm just trying to save time. This is the project team, and the existing bridge, as Richard mentioned, is 85 feet by 90 feet. It's going to be replaced by a 105 feet wide by 240 feet long bridge. The main reason for that extra length is that the county flood control district had calculated the Q50 bulk and burn volume to be such that it would demand that opening. It also serves the lagoon, but the main reason for that increased length is to accommodate that Q50 bulk and burn flow. Next, please. This is the location of the bridge. Of course, you're familiar with it. On the high end, we have the flood control area, which is potentially going to be also the lagoon, the Trancas Lagoon, which will be developed sometime in the future. And then on the other side, we have the ocean. The length that you see highlighted is 240 feet, and the existing bridge is just over the creek itself right now, and that's 90 feet. Next one, please. This is a view of the bridge, the existing bridge from the inland side. Next, please. The bridge, as you can see, all the steel is rusted and the concrete is busted, and we have several of these pictures. The next one we'll show here, as you can see on the columns, the concrete is falling apart. Next one, and here again. It's ready to, it has lived its usable life, or useful life of over 96 years, and it's ready to be replaced. Next one, please. Another view of the bridge. And this is the low flow of the creek, which happens at the west end of it, and right adjacent to the west abutment wall. Next, please. The replacement bridge I mentioned, it's 109 feet wide by 240 feet long in 4 bays, 4 60-foot bays. And our estimate currently is $13.5 million. We estimate the construction to take 27 months. We can only get the work in the creek done during the dry season, which is from April 15th to November 15th. So that's basically a 7-month window for 2 years that we have, that we can get in the creek, demolish the existing half of the bridge, and then remove the existing foundations, drive the piles, put in the new foundation, get out of the creek, and build the superstructure. And that all has to happen within 7 months. And that becomes very critical to start the project, because right now we are aiming to finish this project by the end of September, which is the end of this month. Meaning getting it ready to be advertised. And that includes securing all of the necessary permits, which this permit is one of them. And then we have put it for a risk vote with CTC for October. And then we plan on awarding the contract and getting the construction started by February 1st. That gives us about 2.5, 3 months to do a whole lot of work that needs to happen before the dry season starts, such as relocating utilities, and that 16-inch water line needs to be moved out, installing that temporary light at Guernsey, and shifting traffic to the west side. There's a whole lot that needs to occur before we can get into the creek and actually start the demolition of the bridge. So it is very critical for us to get this permit as soon as possible. Next, please. Next. And this is, Richard chose these renderings. This is rendering of the bridge. It's going to be, the new rendering is going to be slightly different because of the change that city requested to move the bridge barrier inside side and separate the bike and traffic from the pedestrian area. So it'll be a slightly different. The same bridge railing will be used, but it'll be moved inside, and a new bridge railing that Richard showed it will be used. Next, please. This is the rendering from the inland view. This will be the same. It will look like the same thing that you see here. Next, please. And this is the street view. Next. Well, let's go back to that slide, please. So here on the right side, Richard talked about this. The barrier that you see on the right side, far right, will be moved to where the outside line is, where the bike lane is, and so there will be a separation. So that becomes the bridge railing, and then there will be a pedestrian railing at the edge of the bridge also. And that one is 2-inch pipe, so it's a see-through railing, but we'll have two railings there, one for traffic, one for pedestrian. Next. And this is the schedule. As you can see, it's a pretty crash schedule. Our goal is to get out there and start the construction as soon as possible. So award is February 12th, and CTC, it's a brisk vote. CTC does not vote on projects until they are completely finished, but we have asked them to make an exception because of the dry season window that we are facing, and they have accepted to vote this project in October. This shows December. This is an old one. Actually, I moved it up to October, and we're going to start construction in February. This is, again, this schedule was revised, and we crashed the schedule so that we can have more time for the work that needs to happen before the dry season starts. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, and these are the construction staging. Richard went over this. Basically, I'll go over it very quickly on both stages. The first stage is to move the 4 lanes of traffic to the ocean side on the existing bridge, and remove the inland half of the bridge and construct a new one. The second stage will be putting the 4 lanes on the new bridge, and removing and replacing the ocean side. The figures here are revised. This slide shows a 7,000 yard for each stage. That number stands at 11,000 yards and for each stage. So for about 22,000 yards altogether will be the excavation to accommodate the lengthened bridge. Next slide, please. And then the next slide. I think I'm pretty much done with this presentation. I just want to get into some of the questions that were raised in regards to the sea level rise. We had provided a report to the city, and which was reviewed and approved. So when it comes to the sea level rise and the water, actually the bridge needs to be above the highest water mark that can happen. So there are 2-3 different sources of that water level. One of them is from the ocean side, and in the ocean side we have 3-4 different elements, such as the median high water mark, which for this side is 5.24 foot. 1% extreme exceedance, which is 2.66 feet, and a 2% incident wave run-up, and that's a 0.96 foot. Putting all those 3 together, it's an 8.86 feet over the existing water limit. And then on the other side, we have the sea level rise for the Santa Monica area for the year 2100, and that's 6.8. So we don't accumulate the 2 together, and we take the worst case scenario between the 2. So 8.86 from the ocean side is the highest level, highest water mark that we can have. And then we have from the inland side, the flood water coming through, right? And FEMA has that elevation at 13 feet, which is quite higher than the ocean side. And the soffit of the bridge, which is the bottom of the deck, is at 15 feet elevation, which means we have, actually the female Q100 is at 13 and a half. We have 1.5 foot of freeboard, which puts us at 15 feet for the soffit. And that's where the bridge is. So there should not be really any concern with the seawater rise or sea level rise, because in this case, the FEMA's Q100 exceeds it by at least 5 or 6 feet. So that's about that question regarding the sea level rise. And I'm open to any other questions there may be.
John?
Oh, did we have, I didn't know, do we have other questions?
Public speakers.
We have,
Okay, we'll ask those questions after the public speakers. Who's our first public speaker?
well, we have Chris Frost and then Raja Gosnell and then Craig Hill. But I'd like to mention that 3.5 minutes is still available for rebuttal for the applicant.
Okay, great. Let's start with where we had first.
Chris Frost.
Is he unmuted?
I am unmuted. Good evening, Commission and staff. How are you? I wanted to speak first about, and I didn't actually hear anybody talk about it in here, but I believe the temporary bike and pedestrian lanes that will be carrying traffic on one side of the road in the beginning and the other side of the road afterwards is only 4 feet wide. And I'm concerned that, 4 feet is, you're not going to get 2 sets of bicycle handlebars past each other at 4 feet. And you're going to have some problems with that. I would like to see it 10 feet. It's just 4 feet is just, to me, it's just very, very, very small. And I think if you think about it, crossing 2 bikes against each other, one coming at the other in a 4-foot lane is going to be, even if they're walking them, is going to be a slim chance of getting them past each other. That's really the crux of what I had to say. But I also wanted to thank Rob and everybody down in Public Works for maintaining our stance on public safety about the inclusion of a right turn lane to Trancas Canyon Road at the same time as the bridge project. I've pushed for this in public safety for, well, ever since the remodel of the Trancas Shopping Center. I don't know, it's like 8 years, I guess. And I'm excited to see that going in. I think it's going to be I have a huge factor in safety at that intersection and turning in and out of that parking lot. Thank you.
Okay, next. Who do we have? Do we have Raj next?
Yes, now we have Raja Gosnell. 3 minutes.
Okay, Raj, is your mic on freed up? I can't see him on my screen.
Parker, do you see him in?
Yeah, Raj is there. He's showing muted though.
Okay, hit unmute
There we
and
go.
then, okay, yeah, can you hear me?
You're good now. Yes.
All right, thank you. My name is Raja Gosnell. I own the house at 6457 Guernsey Avenue at the northwest corner of Guernsey Avenue and PCH. We've owned here since 2012 and are full-time residents. Basically, I want to know how my property and my family's well-being is going to be affected by the installation of this temporary traffic signal at Guernsey Avenue. And will there be anything done to mitigate the sort of drastic increase in traffic noise and airborne pollutants that will inevitably come up from trucks and motorcycles stopping, idling, accelerating away from a dead stop, outside my home? And what can be done to mitigate the light pollution that will inevitably spill into my yard every night for 2 years? I also want to know if the signal will be anchored on my PCH side slope, and how will the potential slide risk that comes from disturbing the slope be mitigated? And who will be responsible for the potential slides in the future once the signal is removed? And I guess on top of that, does the signal actually need to go there, or can we push it west where there is no population center closer to the open space that is going to become the lagoon?
Okay, we'll try to get those answered for you. Do you have anything else to say?
He's muted again. Raji, muted again. There you go.
Do you hear me? Okay.
Raj? Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have many things to say, but I think that's the gist of it for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and then now we have,
Well, I'm sorry. Will there be answers to those questions forthcoming, or?
We'll try to get them for you.
I appreciate that, sir, and I appreciate everything you're doing.
So now we have Craig Hill.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you've been able to stay cool. The wave uprush and sea level rise numbers are very confusing. So here's some questions and considerations. You know, Hans has video of surfers going all the way up under the bridge. So this is not a remote thing. And to clarify, the coastal engineering review sheet does say that the wave uprush study is consistent with the one done for the adjacent 30708 PCH project. And you know that Coastal said that those numbers are deficient. They themselves appealed your approval of that project. And they said that a sea rise factor of 74 inches, they call it 6.15 feet, 74 inches should be used, which is 56 inches higher than what you guys approved. So the implication is maybe the bridge's sea rise numbers might also be 56 inches too low. But then how similar are the house's finished floor elevation and the bridge's total flooding elevation in terms of the required feet above sea level? Here, the adjacent house has an FFE of over 19 feet, which Coastal says is not enough by 56 inches. So that's almost 24 feet. Tonight, we just heard that it only needs to be 8.86 feet at the bridge, while meanwhile, the report says the total flooding elevation of the bridge is 12 feet. So that's still 7 feet lower than what you guys had required of the house and 12 feet lower than the 24 feet that Coastal said it should be. So in addition to the sea rise, one of my concerns about 30708 PCH was that the uprush study is based on an assumed 4-foot wave when waves of 10 feet or more are foreseeable. So adding more realistic wave height to that 56-inch sea rise discrepancy produces a height discrepancy between the current design and what's required that might be 10 or 12 feet. That in turn would suggest that the roadbed on both ends of the bridge might need to be higher too. And if the bridge needs to be between 5 and 12 feet higher, could that much grade be integrated into the 240-foot length? Or perhaps just a middle portion needs to be high enough? And after all, if the ends aren't high enough above sea level, then neither would be the whole highway itself. So that raises a more basic question of, does it even matter how high the bridge is if much of the rest of PCH will be inundated by the time that extra height would make a difference? So what is the time frame the bridge is being designed for? What are Caltrans projections of how long PCH will remain viable as it serves an increasingly inundated Malibu? In other words, how long will it be economically viable to be making increasingly frequent repairs? Is that going to be 50 years, 100 years? So in the end, to know what bridge height we need, we have to have a clear idea of how long the bridge is expected to be useful. And so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, we're going back to the applicant for rebuttal. I think you have three and a half minutes. Is that right, Kathleen?
3 minutes and 34 seconds.
I got it closed.
Very close.
All right, so I'm going to attempt to respond to some of the questions. The first question was about a 4-foot walk during construction. Well, the actual pedestrian and the bike walk that we are designing is 5 feet wide. And the reason it is 5 feet, and that's only on the bridge. As it leaves the bridge, it becomes wider. because at the bridge, in order to minimize the width of the bridge, we had to put the sidewalk outside. So the sidewalk is being constructed cantilevered from the bridge, and the bridge structure only allows 5 feet. It cannot take anything wider than that. I asked the designers to look at 6 feet up to 8 feet, but 5 feet is the most they could accommodate, given the age of the structure, given the structural strength of the bridge. So at the bridge, it's 5 feet, and bikers are not expected to be riding their bikes. We will have signs that they have to walk their bikes through that area. And then after that, it becomes wider. I think that was the first question. The second question about from Mr. Raja, and he had sent actually an email which Richard had sent to me, and I had provided very detailed response to all of his questions. He basically read his letter, and I had responded to all of those questions. Richard, do you want to pass on, or have you passed on my responses to Raja, or should I go over them again?
I am trying to verify that email was, I know we distributed that email to all the commissioners and any interested parties, and I'm trying to verify if the homeowner was added to the interested parties, but that email was distributed to the Planning Commission, and if needed, I can address.
All of those questions are answered in in specific details as far as elevations and and the foundations of the existing light and everything else that were questioned. So I'm going to skip because I only have 3 minutes, and then I'm going to pass the third question about the sea level rise to our hydraulic engineer who's on the phone with me. So I hope you can hear her well. Go ahead, Ginger.
Okay, hi, this is Ginger. I'm going to respond to the last question. Regarding to all the study we have, this is the sea level rise. It's according to the latest document we have, that it's a 2019 release document, how we should study the sea level rising, which we come up with a 6.8. And then the mean high water, 5.24, and that's well documented by the NOAA. And then there's a 2% wave run up, and there's a 0.56, 75 percentile as a result of the 2% wave runoff. And then we have 95 percentile and up to be 0.96 feet, and then the last one, the maximum, go up to the 2.36. Now we don't usually go up to the maximum, and 2% wave runoff. This is according to FEMA's method. The method is downloaded from the FEMA. It's a FEMA approved method. And then the very last one that we have in our document, our study, it's 1% extreme exceedance water level, and this 1% exceedance water level, it's counting for the storm tide, astronomical tide, and the storm surge. And then this came out to be 2.66 feet. So if you, and I understand the concern that there was a previous study, which I didn't really get a chance to look at it, but according to my study, or our study, that all this study is documented, and then the method is well known. And we did not come up with the method, and we just used the legalized method, and it's been well documented. So if you would have used all this number, the sea level rising 6.8, mean high 5.24, the wave runoff 0.56 is 75 percentile, and the 1% exceedance water level, you would end up with a 15.4. So 15.4 feet of water that's coming up from the wavefront. So we're talking about really extreme. We're getting very conservative just to satisfy The third question, I forgot his name, Clay Hill or Clay Hahn or whatever. So he's concerned that our number was not conservative enough. I can guarantee this number is very conservative as you add them all up. So we're talking about 15.446 or somewhere around there. Our bridge soffit, on the average, that across the channel is 16. It's on the 16 elevation, 16 feet. So we have room. We have room of a 0.4, 0.5. So we are above water level. Now we have 100 years coming out, and I actually did a scenario study just to quick run quite some time ago, just to see how it will fade out. We will still be above water. This only 100 years flood of the 50-year Bogenberg will still come out. It only rise the water level just by 0.15. So we still way above water level. The bridge will still be fine. So I want to guarantee you that if you want to see some study, we can run up some number so you can see it. So, and that would be where I ended right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ginger. So the study was done based on FEMA, as Ginger just alluded to, and we have provided that to the city. The city has reviewed it, as Rob mentioned. He has run it by the Coastal Commission and FEMA also, and everybody's in concurrence that the numbers are correct, and then the bridge, which is expected to last for at least 75 years beyond 2025, up to 2100, is going to be safe given the current methodology for determining the sea level rise and water elevation calculations that we have.
Okay, I assume as time has run out, I'd like to keep close the public hearing and then keep them on the line for questions, unless there's objection. Can I ask you one question that I don't think Ginger answered, and that is, and it's actually not part of your project, but if you are 15 feet, how much higher are you than the bridge that's there now? Is it going to go up? Is there going to be a rise as you drive over it?
We are maintaining the vertical profile of the roadway, which means the top will be the same, but we are making the deck a lot shallower. So we're going with precast members, which is going to be the shallowest that we could make the bridge. So the bottom, so we have raised the bottom, but the top will remain the same.
Okay, and then I assume by that the roadway on PCH in that area is basically the same height, and therefore it should be theoretically safe for 75 years.
That's right.
Okay. Does anybody else have other questions? Chris.
A quick one to Ginger. Just on the numbers that you ran through, I just wanted to confirm the math you're running, that 15.4 feet. That's current conditions, or is that expected after a 100-year sea level rise of 6.8 feet? What's the conditions that metric is determined on? Sorry, Roger, if you can. Yeah.
I didn't quite catch what you're saying. So after 6.8 feet sea level rising, where would the water be? Is that what you're asking?
Well, just to clarify, so that 6.8 sea level feet plus all the mean high water at 2% wave run up, et cetera, your math is calculated based on that 100-year FEMA guidance on sea level rise. Is that correct?
So the FEMA actually has a different number. So FEMA actually came out with a 13.3.
Okay, so a little less.
The downside of the FEMA number, when you go through the FEMA documentation, they do not actually disclose how did they come up with that 13.3. But we did use that. We used that number, and then we added the sea level rising number. So our number is very conservative.
Okay, and at 6.8 feet, what time frame is that estimation for? Is that the
year 2100?
2100. So we're talking 100 years out. That's that higher expected value based on what the Coastal Commission is using as their standard.
No, yes. NOAA is giving us that number. 21 a year is 2100, and sea level rise is anticipated to be at 6.8.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I have a second question. Oh, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of different questions. Looking at the rendering you have of the bridge, it appears that there is going to be a solid barrier between the westbound and the eastbound traffic lanes. Is that correct?
No, those are paddles. Those are not solid barrier.
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
Those are paddles. Those are.
They are paddles. They look like they were connected at the top, but if there's going to be candlesticks or paddles like that. Okay. Second question. You know, this looking at the pictures of the underneath the bridge and the condition of the concrete and the steel and so forth, it looks very familiar to me because I'm more familiar with the bridge at the other end, I should say, of Zuma Beach at Zuma Canyon. Looks to me like that bridge is about the same age and roughly in the same condition. Can you give us any, is there any consideration that Caltrans as to when that bridge might be need to be replaced similarly to the one we're dealing with at Trancas?
Well, our bridge inspection program follows the federal program, which is every 2 years we inspect all of our bridges, and they have criteria that will trigger whether they need to be rehabilitated or replaced. So I don't know anything specific about that bridge, but I can look into it and see what the condition is and if it's been flagged for replacement.
I just thought if there was a heads up, you might be able to give it to us, but if you can't, you can't. Finally, there was one question and I didn't see the response back, but the issue of moving the light from Guernsey to the west toward the Trancas Riders and Ropers field, is there some reason why the light needs to be at Guernsey and couldn't be moved further to the west?
The transitions that we need, the traffic transitions, considering the speed of 35 miles that we're maintaining through the traffic zone, I mean the construction zone, will require those type of transitions. And then the most logical place for placing the traffic light would be at the intersection. And that will help us putting the right transition to the left or the right as we are moving traffic, shifting the traffic. And also it provides a safe passage for traffic coming out of Guernsey, going into Guernsey, as well as the bike and pedestrian traffic.
Okay, finally, I have one comment to make, and that is I had no friends who grew up in the area, and it's fairly common comment that they've made over the years that after heavy rains, they could go down into Trancas Creek and arrowheads and potsherds and things like that from the previous residents would be disclosed, and they would go around and collect arrowheads back in the days when that was permitted. So if you're going to be digging out that eastern bank of the creek, and your mitigation measure says that, well, you're going to be on the lookout for any cultural artifacts and be prepared to shut down the work when if they're discovered, I think you better factor that into your analysis, because I think it's highly likely that there are going to be abundant cultural resources that are going to be discovered when you start digging into that eastern bank. And that's it. Those are my comments.
Okay.
Anyone else? Chris?
Yeah, just I know in terms of that, what's the burn and flow analysis, whatever what the term is. Thank you, bulk and burn. So from the experience we had, because we just had a major event, and tons of debris flowed down the hill from the canyon up slope. Did that tend to deposit and that proposed lagoon area like under the bridge, or did it tend to scour through there in terms of how that hydrologic flow went with that last experience we had? Because we've had a local creek here in my community where the flow slowed down and the creek disappeared. It literally filled up and there was nowhere for the water to go but over the bridge. So, what was the experience for how that particular flow behaved during as everything came down the hill from the canyon?
Well, first of all, the area, the flood area is maintained and managed by the county flood control, not by us. So I have my own observations on that. We had a lot of settlement, and the county did a project to remove quite a lot of the debris from there, and also open it up for future use, and so that they have the capacity for the new flow to come through. And I don't know whether this was not a Q100 event. Otherwise, it would have impacted the bridge. But so as far as what happened to the flow, I guess it managed to go through, and the rest of it settled, and the county removed it. So.
And I think Director DeBoe has some experience there. That's what I was looking for, just recently what happened there.
Yeah, Rob. Go ahead, Rob.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, if you recall, the county flood control has several debris basins up in Malibu West, and those structures picked up the majority of the debris coming down in Trancas Creek, and so it didn't. There could have been some that went down the creek, and there's the concrete channel, and then there's open channel and all that stuff. There could have been some down there, but the majority was caught by those debris basins up in there, and it was taken out by the county.
And that's a timber basin. So I mean, I'm just trying to play through what kind of the worst case scenarios are. If that had, say that had let go and that debris had come down to, to deposit on around, in the lagoon and under the bridge, I'm just trying to visualize, okay, so all of a sudden we've just lost, 8 feet of capacity across the whole 200-foot span, and, water's now topping the bridge. Are those scenarios kind of contemplated? Like, could the structure handle that load if it came through? Obviously, we're designing to avoid that, but.
So real quick, I can give a little insight of this, and Caltrans can expand on it. But when they did their hydraulic analysis, they looked at this calculation is called burn in bulk.
Right.
And what that means is that the actual stormwater flow includes the burn material and bulk material debris coming down there. And so when they do their calculations, they do account for that.
Well, the only reason I'm kind of dwelling on this is that if there were the structural failure upslope, and then all that debris came, it would pile up against those, the pilings, even though there was 60-foot spacing. Would the structure be at risk if we had an unexpected beyond the 100-year, design where if over top the bridge would handle that load? I guess is my question.
That's probably a question Caltrans can answer.
The bridge is designed to handle the Q100 bulk and burn easily. And actually the soffit of the bridge, as I mentioned, we have made the bridge shallower. The soffit of the bridge is 1.5 foot above the top of the high water level in a Q100 event. And the foundations that we are creating, these are some 60 to 80 feet deep pile foundation, which is designed to withstand any of these type of flows.
And if the kind of the edge of that of the deck took a heavy water load sideways, it should be able to flow through and over without taking that structure out.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay. That's all I was wanting to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, Steve?
Just a real quick one for Caltrans. As you guys proceed along this path, I'm sure you've thought through all the different signage you got to have to make motorists aware of what's going on. But I just wonder, would you guys be willing, as you sort of get into the process of just taking that signage and showing it to our Public Safety Commission? So if they've got any questions with it, at least we can get those addressed before we get too far into the program. Is that something you guys would consider doing?
Well, we have been sharing our project plans with the city, and Rob and Richard and others at the city have been looking at it, and they know fully well how we are, our signage, traffic signage is going to work. And we also have an extensive public outreach program that is going to kick in as soon as the project is advertised.
Yeah, I'm not trying to put any speed bumps in your way. We're just, we've got this Public Safety Commission, and their real job is to make sure that we're doing stuff right. So just, even if you just give them a quick overview, I think it might be helpful. If they've got any, any speed bumps, they might be able to help you get through those. Rob?
Yeah, that's another good one. I'll add that to our list of agenda items to go through. I think that's very good, and get the information out to the public. We'll try to do maybe we got to mix in maybe with the Public Works Commission or so one of those two. We'll make sure that it's there and get an update to them.
That'd be great. We got these groups. Let's use them.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Thank
And
you.
it looks like we started that on SD1. That I think those are the long-term signs. There was also a concern raised by Commissioner Frost about having the short-term signs also. So it's clear what the advisement is during those temporary periods, which is higher risk, it looks like.
That's all I got, John.
That's a statement. Okay, I just wanted to
Sorry.
go back to Raja, and say that I did receive the Caltrans answer, and Richard, I'm sure will send you the answers that we got if you didn't get them. They were pretty extensive. The only thing I don't remember them covering was the location of the light, which they just covered. So I think you have reasonable answers from them. Actually, they were actually pretty good and pretty extensive. So make sure you get that from Richard. Chris, do you have something else?
Yeah, I wanted to call out, especially for Raj's concerns. There's the one document, you can write it down, is the temporary signal system stage 1, E-1. It's in the overall document submitted for this plans, and it shows exactly where the lanes are. I mean, the biggest benefit is that the southbound traffic, obviously is on the farther side of the lane when they stop there. But at least you've got a good illustration of exactly where things are if you haven't seen that.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that too. That's why I asked the question of whether the light goes away when this is done, because it will dramatically affect him if that light remains, since
Light will be temporary.
yeah, it will be, if it's not, it'll be the access route, egress route of choice of the high school. Steve.
Got time for a motion?
Sure.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Second? I'll second it.
Okay.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
And that includes the adjustment that Richard went through in the staff report,
At the
correct?
beginning, when talking about, right, he had that one thing he wanted to change, yes.
I just wanted to, I had one clarification question if I could. I just wanted to confirm that there's always been a right turn lane issue into the Trunca Shopping Center. Will that be with the widening the bridge? Will that allow accommodating a better right turn into there?
Part of the project, as I understand, right, Richard?
Just
so let me kind of jump in on there too. For the last, I don't know, 6+ months, I've been negotiating and working with Caltrans to put this right turn lane in. We've had several meetings back and forth with Caltrans, and I'm happy to say Caltrans has agreed to a concept plan to move forward with adding the right turn lane there. The city has transportation funding to move forward with it. I am in the process of finalizing some funding to move forward to do this project, and we'll be probably getting this project going and either doing it with conjunction or immediately right after putting the right turn lane with the bridge. And fortunately, the bridge layout does match up with the proposed right turn lane. We make sure all that kind of worked out. And so at the end of the day, we'll have a new bridge, we'll have a new right turn lane, and some good stuff going.
Great work.
Somebody in the city owes you a beer for pulling it off. Thank you.
Exactly.
Well, I just want to say it's been, I don't know, I've been like Chris Frost mentioned, it was like 8+ years when we first started, when this came through and everything, and I tried to push to get the right turn lane in, and came very close about, like I said, about 8 years ago, but now we're gotten real close, and yeah, we're excited to get going on that.
It was a biggie.
And sorry, John, I don't want to slow down the vote, but I do have 2 more questions. I just want to clarify where the bridge is, is now and is going to be. That historically has been where the lagoon is cut out to the ocean, I assume, becomes a lagoon again. Is there any potential impact to the neighboring properties? Like, do we have a sense that they won't somehow either get, flooded through it becoming a lagoon, or somehow they're, just some introduction of water could impact their foundations? did the hydrology study cover that? I mean, it was 700 pages of docs. I just want to make sure we at least got that math done on that.
Chris, at the time the Trancas market was approved, there was extensive study of the lagoon for the setbacks, and the Park Service proposed restoration of the lagoon. So there's a lot of study on that. It's not complete because we had required that the owners of Trancas turn it over to the state, but that's been a 8-year project, and all depends on money and everything else. But there was a huge study about that.
Okay. So, and Director DeBoe, do you have anything to add, or?
Well, it's the only thing that I want to bring up is that when we reviewed the hydrology report and looking at the FEMA impacts, that's what we're looking at, the FEMA impacts. Their analysis showed that there isn't any significant impacts on adjoining properties after this, and so yeah, we didn't see any issues with their hydrology that would cause a concern.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can we call for the vote?
Commissioner Euring,
Yes.
Chair Mazza,
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Commissioner Weil,
Yes.
Vice Chair Marks,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right. Thank you, Caltrans. You did good.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to recuse myself for the next item.
Can we take a 4-minute break?
Okay, well,
Or you're leaving.
as soon as I turn it over to Chairman Pro Tem Marks to handle
Yes.
from there on. Okay, see you
I-
next time.
All right, thank you, John. So, or I should say Chair Mazza. So let's take a 5-minute break? What do we think?
Plenty, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, come back at what time check's that going to be? Like
9:53.
8:53, right?
53.
8:53.
Okay, see you in 5.
Cool.
Long break otherwise.
If everyone could turn off their screens and mute themselves while they're on the break.
All right, looks like we're getting our numbers back. Here, Anika, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Good.
So Trevor, we hit our time limit. Looks like we got everyone back. I'll call us back to order if you're good with that.
We have everyone. Yes.
All right.
There.
Sorry. Bonnie, let me check. Does anyone see if she's here?
Oh, there we go. All right, let's go.
Great. All right, we'll back in session here. Let me read this item in and start from there. So we're looking at coastal development permit number 17-043, site plan review number 17-014, and demolition permit number 17-013, an application to demolish an existing single-family residence and associated development and construct a new single-family residence and associated development, also known as item 4B. Can we get a staff report, please? And for reference, this was continued from August 3rd.
Yes, good evening, Vice Chair Marks and members of the Planning Commission. This project was last presented to the Planning Commission at its August 3rd, 2020 regular meeting. The project had been denied by the Planning Commission and appealed to the City Council, who then remanded the project back to the Planning Commission to allow the applicant an opportunity to make project revisions to address neighborhood character concerns, and to also meet with the concerned neighbor, Mr. Stockwell. During the Planning Commission's meeting on August the 3rd, the Planning Commission continued the project to this meeting so that the applicant could reach out to the concerned neighbor. Next slide, please. And I'm going to refresh your memory about the project. The site is an infill lot, roughly 1.5 acres in size in the Point Dume neighborhood. And it's located directly across the street from Malibu Elementary School. The site is developed with an existing single-family residence and 2-story accessory development, and is surrounded by 1- and 2-story residential development. Next slide, please. The project consists of the demolition of an existing residential development totaling approximately 4,700 square feet, and the construction of a new 2-story residence just shy of 6,400 square feet. And that square footage includes an attached garage of 966 square feet, covered loggias that add up to about 650 square feet that are split between the first and second floor. And the project also includes a new on-site wastewater treatment system and associated development. Next slide, please. This graphic illustrates the evolution of the project. Starting on the far left is the original design that was denied by the Planning Commission, which included a second floor, just over 3,000 square feet. The middle image illustrates portions of the original second floor footprint that were modified to address neighborhood character concerns. And the image on the right is the current design being considered by the Planning Commission this evening. The project changes included the removal of a bedroom to the left of the tower, which is on the east, and the remaining floor area on the second floor was reconfigured to create a little bit more articulation for the front facade, while also shrinking the rest of the second floor area. These changes resulted in a reduction of approximately 1,200 square feet from the second floor. As directed by the Planning Commission, the applicant met with the concerned neighbor on August the 11th, 2020. Staff also attended this meeting. It was held virtually on Zoom. And at that meeting, Mr. Stockwell, the concerned neighbor, expressed his concerns about the configuration of the second floor area, where he stated had the potential to create shading and to invade the privacy of his backyard and patio areas. To minimize potential shading and loss of privacy of his property, Mr. Stockwell suggested making some additional modifications, which included the removal of approximately 600 square feet of the northern portion of the second floor. That's the end of the structure that's opposite of Gray Fox. So he suggested removing about 600 square feet on the second floor, the northernmost portion of the second floor, and relocating it to the west of the proposed tower along the street side of the residence. Mr. Stockwell also requested that the second floor loggia be eliminated to protect the privacy of his backyard and patio areas. After this meeting, the applicant informed staff that after considering the project revision suggested by Mr. Stockwell, that the property owner is not willing to make additional changes to the project. And consensus regarding the project design appears to be unreachable between the parties. Next slide, please. Staff has received additional correspondence from Mr. Stockwell that discusses his concerns with the current second floor configuration. The average second floor size of the surrounding residences, and his continued disappointment about the applicant's efforts or lack of efforts to work with the neighbors. Staff also received additional correspondence from the applicant who outlined the efforts made to date to reach out to Mr. Stockwell while satisfying the requirements of the Malibu Municipal Code and the LCP, which includes previous revisions to the project to address neighborhood character concerns. The property owner has also provided correspondence, which was really directed to the neighbor that appealed to him to let him build his home. Next slide, please. Although it is ideal for neighbors to collaborate to resolve project concerns, and it was what the city council had hoped could be achieved with their direction to the applicant during the appeal hearing. And unfortunately, it was not able to occur in this case. At this time, the project before the Planning Commission is unchanged from the version previously presented to this body on August the 3rd, 2020, and in the associated agenda report for that meeting. Staff has demonstrated in the analysis of that last agenda report that the project does conform to the LCP and the Malibu Municipal Code, and all required findings can be met for this project. And in conclusion, staff recommends adoption of resolution 20-51 and approving CDP number 17-43 and the associated discretionary requests. And this concludes my presentation, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you for that, Renika. Commissioner Euring?
Renika, just a quick, can you remind us what the city council actually said when they sent this back? What was their direction?
Their direction was to allow the applicant to make some modifications to the second floor, and they also suggested the applicant to reach out to the neighbor.
Gotcha, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. And any disclosures for this one? Commissioner Weil, anything?
Yeah, let's see, I had conversations with Don Schmidt. I had conversations with the telephone call with the neighbor. I think that's it.
Great. Commissioner Euring?
I had a conversation with Don Schmitz.
Excellent. Commissioner Jennings?
Yes, the same. I had a brief telephone conversation with Don Schmitz regarding the discussions that have been taking place between the two parties.
Got it. I had nothing beyond the disclosures from last session on this. Are there, sorry, go ahead.
In the conversation with Mr. Schmitz, did either of you learn something that was not in the staff report?
No.
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 Thank you, Trevor. Any other questions for staff on this one? Okay, then since I don't have a gavel, I'll go ahead and gavel into public hearing, I guess, a little hit on the head there. Let's see, so I did want to clarify as we get into this, Trevor, last time Well, who's got the 15 minutes? Who's got the 3 minutes? Just so we can clarify that up front as far as expectations.
This will be the applicant has 15 minutes to present.
Got it.
And then has a rebuttal.
Okay.
It'd be different if it was an appeal to council, but this is not an appeal. This is
That's right, because it was just sent back for a remand, whatever it was called. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So go ahead with who's available to speak.
So we have the applicant team of Don Schmitz and John Atwill. And then we have members of the public, John Stockwell, Matt Palmieri, and Craig Hill.
Thank you. And Don, I believe you have the floor. Let us know if you want to save any time for rebuttal.
Thank you, Chair Marks. I will be retaining time for rebuttal. Can I go to the next slide, please? For the record, this is Don Schmitz. I am the representative for the applicants, John and Tatiana Atwill. I want to go over the history of our outreach to our neighbor, Mr. Stockwell. My clients met with him back in 2016. The original design of the house was so that the second story would be on the easterly property boundary adjacent to Mr. Stockwell. This makes just architectural sense because my clients wanted to maximize the sunshine coming into the pool on the design, and they did not want to have shading in their yard from the second story. But Mr. Stockwell was not liking that concept, and so the design was flipped, putting the second story on the westerly side of the property away from his house. My clients then met with him in October of 2018, discussed the project and the house in relationship to the size of the lot. More than that, there was bedrooms on the second story. They met with him again, both Mr. and Mrs. Atwill, November 1st, 2018. They discussed the height and the massing of the property and his concerns about impacts to the privacy of his property. Next slide, please. And I do understand from the correspondence of Mr. Stockwell, he does not concur with this meeting timeline. In December of 2018, my client again met with Mr. Stockwell at his residence to review the project plans. They conducted a site visit. Mr. Stockwell expressed he didn't want a second floor next to his residence and made a comment in regards to the second story might not be appropriate for Mr. Atwill due to his age. Then in January 4th, 2019, there was a meeting in my office with Mr. Stockwell and my clients. And I have firsthand knowledge in regards to this meeting. I facilitated it. And I can tell you with accuracy that Mr. Stockwell did at that time tell us he would prefer this was a one-story home. He wasn't concerned about the size of the house. In fact, he said, build an 8,000 square foot house. He was okay with that. He even referenced a project up on Selfridge that had maximized out the TDSF that I had gotten approved some months before. Next slide, please. We then had the Zoom meeting with their staff and Mr. Stockwell on July 20th, 2020. Mr. Stockwell had a number of comments. He didn't like the loggia. He didn't believe the council provided a clear direction in regards to the project redesign. He claimed he'd never demanded a total elimination of the second floor. And we did affirm to him that we were not willing to eliminate the second floor. Next slide, please. Subsequent to that, the Planning Commission meeting, we did meet with Mr. Stockwell again. He again reaffirmed that he was not demanding the elimination of the second story, but wanted a reduction. He asked that we eliminate the northern portion of the second story. He indicated he wanted us to put back into the design the bedroom on the east side of the tower. Ms. Brooks slightly misspoke on that, not the westerly side, which is closer to his home. And he indicated that he was now supportive of a second story just slightly over 1,800 square foot. We were like 20 square foot off from what we're proposing and what he was more comfortable with. Next slide, please. So the design on the left is what was in front of the city council, and the project on the right is the redesign that we did where we eliminated bedrooms, we eliminated the covered loggia, we removed the bedroom on the easterly side of the tower. We shrunk it down significantly. Next slide, please. So this is the requested redesign that we would be looking at from Mr. Stockwell, where we would eliminate the bedroom on the northerly side of the second story, put the bedroom back on the easterly side, again, ironically closer to his home, and reinstate the square footage. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, this works in a completely dysfunctional floor plan layout for the applicants. And they would now have 3 small bedrooms, which would be bisected by the hallway coming out of the tower, which is how you access the second floor. So that is why the Outwells are just one of the reasons why they're just simply not willing to do this. Next slide, please. Already shown by staff. Next slide, please. So we do want to point out that originally the second floor was 3,073 square foot. We did reduce it by 1,233 square foot. That's a 40% reduction. That's getting close to almost half. And that reduces the second story to 1,840 square foot. That's definitely a good faith effort. Next slide, please. This shows and illustrates the modifications to the project. Next slide. Next slide. I want to point out again that we will have a full 65-foot front yard setback, unlike our neighbor who has a 50% reduction with an additional 10-foot setback for the second story. We'll be set back some 75 feet. Next slide. And this was the original elevations from the story poles from our neighbor and our proposed house. Next slide, please. And you can see what the reduction is in front of you, and the area to the right, which is the only part of the second story that you can see from a public viewing area. Mr. Stockwell's asking us to put that back in. We think that's counterintuitive to address neighborhood character concerns, which is what this is supposed to be about. Next slide. So you can see on these elevations seen from the street, originally we had a 45-foot wide second story frontage facing the street. Mr. Stockwell's frontage facing the street is pretty nominal, 26 feet. We reduced it to 36.5 feet. Next slide. And our neighbor just 2 doors up has a 110-foot 2-story facing the street. Again, counterintuitive that to address neighborhood character, we would again widen out the second story facing the street to 45 feet. Next slide. So the surrounding neighborhood, 57% of the homes are 2 stories. Next slide. 3 of the 5 homes on this section of Gray Fox are 2 stories. Next slide. And yes, statistically and with very good records and GIS analysis, the average second story is 1,842 square foot. Next slide, please. And you can clearly see this from a number of the homes in the area. So with that, I'd just like to retain the remainder of our time for rebuttal. And I'm available at this point to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. And for reference, Kathleen, how much time does the applicant have?
8 minutes and 22 seconds.
Great. So I think you said next up was Mr. Stockwell, if I recall?
That is correct.
Great.
Bring him up. Mr. Stockwell, you may begin to speak when you're ready.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, sorry. Hi, commissioners. Hold on, let me turn up the second one.
So we could turn up both maybe. Come on, let me hear. While John is trying to get reconnected, can you repeat who the next 2 speakers are, Kathleen, just so we can be ready for those as well?
Matt Palmieri, and then Craig Hill is the last speaker. And then rebuttal time for the applicant.
Thank you. And so just so Mr. Palmieri and Hill, as when Mr. Stockwell finishes, you guys will be up next in that order.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, this is John Stockwell from 29033 Gray Fox. And I just got to say, obviously, I'm very disappointed that after the initial denial of the project on a neighborhood character finding, which was upheld by the city council, which directed the applicant to reach out to the neighbors, the applicant and Don made the decision to not reach out and did a redesign without any input from the neighbors that resulted in them removing the portion of the second story that had the least adverse impact on the neighborhood, while keeping the monolithic north-south section of the project that had the most adverse impact on the neighborhood. And he just stated that the second story square footage used to be on the eastern part of the property. I mean, Renika can tell you that was never the case. After they were forced to finally talk with us, we had a virtual meeting. I decided to take the initiative and say, guys, I know you keep saying I don't want second story square footage. Here's a version where you can have 1,803 square footage. It would have a dramatic reduction on the impact on the neighbors, on shading, on privacy. And they didn't say, okay, now that we understand your specific concerns, let's meet in the middle, or let us think about it, or let us get back to you with some changes or thoughts. They said, nope, we're not changing anything, not a single square foot. And look, I know Don, he's been around a long time. I'm sure he informed his client that second story square footage is a discretionary request that results in a site plan review, and there's no guarantee that a project with thousands of second story square footage will be approved. My architect, Doug Burge, certainly told us that, and that we should limit our second story square footage to less than what the current neighbor had, which is why we kept it at 674 square feet. And even then he told me, go to the neighbor, go to Charlene, show her your rough plans, see if she has any thoughts. She said, I don't want any windows facing my property, move it 10 feet to the north and 5 feet to the west to decrease the shading and privacy impacts on me. And we did it. Now, this is a really different project than Cuthbert Road Fire Rebuild, which only had neighbors speaking in support. This is very different from Selfridge, which was entirely under 18 feet. This project has numerous direct neighbors besides myself objecting. And as Mikey Pearson said during the city council appeal, neighborhood character exists precisely for this project. Mr. Schmitz talks about these meetings we had. Stopping someone in the road in their golf cart is not a meeting. I did walk the property with Mr. Atwell. He told me how beautiful the house was going to be. Nothing was going to change. I reached out to Mr. Schmitz via email to set up a meeting. Again, at that meeting, they told me, the only thing that could happen was that we move the second story square footage closer to you if you keep objecting. At the virtual meeting, Mr. Atwell said he was contemplating suing me for harassment. And honestly, it's really disconcerting being threatened with litigation for speaking up in the public planning process. I'm not a paid consultant, not an architect. I'm just an engaged neighbor, which is what we want every neighbor to be. I know Mr. Schmitz and the applicant have been afforded the courtesy on 3 different occasions to withdraw the project rather than have it rejected. I doubt that if the project were on the verge of approval, someone would ask me if I wanted to come back with a more finely honed argument. And anyone who's lived in Malibu for a while knows it's a small town and that we all have to learn to live with each other and realize the impact we have on each other.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Stockwell. We do have next up, Mr. Palmieri.
Yes, Mr. Palmieri, you may begin when you are ready.
Okay. Good evening, neighbors. My name is Matthew Palmieri. I was born and raised here in Malibu and have lived here pretty much nonstop for 60 plus years. While my family has been here since 1929. My grandmother built one of the very first non-ringe Adamson family houses in Malibu. Surprisingly enough, this is my first time speaking before the Planning Commission in all of the decades that I've lived here. But I have seen many situations over the decades where people move to Malibu and inevitably they bought nearby and would often reach out to introduce themselves and meet their neighbors. If they were planning on making changes to their house, certainly if they were planning on tearing it down and building a significantly larger house, they would always reach out to discuss their plans with their neighbors. They would get feedback and input and always try and make changes if possible to be good neighbors. That's just how the best of Malibu is pretty much always operated. Now, this isn't to say that sometimes there are conflicts between neighbors about noise or dogs or setbacks or bootlegging unreasonable stuff or a myriad of other things. But it was most always about being a good neighbor or attempting to be a good neighbor and acknowledging that we were in a small town living in a relatively and sometimes very close quarters and looking out for each other and being aware of how actions impacted our neighbors. With that said, I do have plenty of experience on both sides of the coin with these kinds of situations since I was born in 1960 in Malibu and raised and lived in a tiny gated high security beach community in the middle of Malibu until 2010, where the houses are piled on top of each other like sardine cans. Specifically, I was especially fortunate to have Ralph Kiewit, a classic old school Malibu guy, as my neighbor who lived on one side of me since 1968 when he built his house next door. Ralph had been in the area since 1935 when he bought 80 acres in Topanga. And he's one of the earliest local surfing pioneers, riding the point and shooting the pier from 1935 into the late 70s. Ralph was a classic gentleman who would always do everything to be a good neighbor. whether it was consulting with us about building his master bedroom so it wouldn't affect our ocean view, then going the extra mile by moving it back another couple of feet further just to go a little extra bit to be an extra neighborly, or when he helped me rebuild my 70-foot property fence when it fell into his yard and crushed his beautiful Italian old antique fountain and all of his trees and broke a couple of windows even. Or when I just happened to be out of town on a surf trip and a fire was coming over Sarah Retreat. He got up on my roof when he was 70+ years old, dragged his water hose up there and sprayed down and squelched burning embers, landing all over my roof in my old shack, one after another for hours and hours late into the night. And I'm sure you all agree that that's about as good above and beyond the call of duty for actions of an exemplary Malibu neighbor. Meanwhile, at the same time, during my 6 decades, directly on the other side, butting up against the side of my house.
Mr. Palmieri, just so you're aware, you're at time, so if you could wrap up as quick as you can.
Yeah, just various new Malibu people who've moved in next door to me often seemingly did their best at every opportunity to act in an entirely unneighborly way, such as knowingly building way past the string line, blocking our ocean view, installing jet engine sounding generators, and so on and so forth. And I would go to them and try and talk to them diplomatically. And
we're going to have you wrap it up.
So I would have my godfather, Warren Christopher, give him a call, and soon after they would apologize, and that would be the end of it. So I just want to say, John Stockwell, who I've known for 40 years, up close and personal, is about as good a neighbor as you could have.
Okay, if we could, we've let you go a little long here. We're gonna have to get the next.
I'm just following the same rules for everyone.
Yeah, I've got to give the same time to all speakers.
Well, give them the same time, but I'm looking.
No, sir, please. It's the next speaker's time. You've had your 3 minutes and then some. We've been pretty liberal with you. If you don't mind, we're going to have to go to the next speaker. That's how this process works as well, with all apologies.
Okay, so we have next Mr. Craig Hill. You may begin when you're ready.
Hi again. 2 points to consider, one on law and one on policy. The 2/3 rule has a second clause. You're very familiar with the first one. The second floor area plus the area of the vaulted ceilings above 18 feet in height shall not exceed 2/3 the first floor area. The second clause, and shall be oriented so as to minimize view blockage from adjacent properties. That's it. There's no clause that says, except when the adjacent property happens to be owned by a close relation. Shall means shall. This application ignores that. The code pertains to properties, not their owner inhabitants. And here the code prevents an applicant from diminishing the value of an adjacent property, which may have, and indeed is likely to have, a different owner in the foreseeable future. Sure, it's nice if you can reduce the visual impact from the street, as the applicant has sensibly tried to do, but that doesn't relieve you of the obligation to comply with the code. So first, by the 2/3 rule, you're obligated not to block the views of adjacent properties. Then second, for the site plan review, you're to reduce the effects on neighborhood character, a requirement which is more subjective. And applying both constraints, if too much volume on the second story facing the street has a disproportionate effect on character, then you're simply limited as to how much second story you can build. The 2/3 rule isn't a right, it's a maximum limit, provided you can meet the other requirements. Now, note, if you look on slide number 4, the revised plan does very little to mitigate view impacts to either neighbor. It's mainly just making it skinnier, but blocking a similar amount of view. Now, secondly, as a matter of policy, at the last 2 meetings on this application here and at council, the two sides were asked to come to some compromise or creative accommodation. That alone is why this wasn't decided several meetings ago, many, many months ago. So in weighing all the factors, given that some subjectivity is in play, you might consider which side has been more proactive about proposing a solution and or more accommodating, because for this decision and for the message it sends about future decisions, the city should be encouraging neighbors to work with each other. That's the most likely way they'll become friendly in the long run. Malibu has a problem with developers sometimes ignoring neighbor preferences. That seems likely to worsen with the increasing speculation and real estate investment trusts that are happening now, unless the city can be more proactive about encouraging neighbors to work together. So here, if you think one side has shown more good faith, that should be rewarded. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, it's back, actually back to the applicant. You have your, what, 8 minutes, 22 seconds or so to reply. Back to Mr. Smits and team.
Before you start the clock, could we pull up my PowerPoint presentation and start with the rebuttal slides, please? There we go. Next slide, please. Again, Don Schmitz on behalf of the applicant. The commissioners, we did redesign, taking into account the substantive feedback we received from Mr. Stockwell. You can see on a comment he provided to the Planning Commission back in January 2019 that he didn't like the turrets and viewing room looking directly down on our property. That's why we redesigned the second story to pull that back further away from his property. Next slide, please. We very much tried to be mindful and careful of his concerns. The tower is 91 feet away from the closest part of his property. Next slide, please. And with the, it's 121 feet away from his house, and by the elimination of the bedroom on the easterly side, we've increased the privacy for Mr. Stockwell. And yes, we did originally envision having the second story on the easterly side of the property. No, we never designed that and submitted it to the city because we did try to be sensitive and respond to Mr. Stockwell. As for Mr. Hill's comments about blockage for the site plan review for the second story on the neighbor to the west, there is no primary or any view blockage whatsoever from the property to the west. Mr. Hill's asking you to contemplate denying the application on a speculation of a view blockage that doesn't exist for a future owner when the current owner has submitted a letter of support to the Planning Commission. I think that's a little over the top. Next slide, please. We have done a significant redesign, and it wasn't just to simply reduce the square footage, although it was a significant reduction to bring it down into the community average, which is what this very Planning Commission told us they wanted to see. It wasn't just making it more skinny. We eliminated the whole bedroom on the far northerly prolongation of the area. It's a significant reduction. And the reason we eliminated the bedroom on the easterly side of the tower, again, because that was a portion that was closest to Mr. Stockwell's property. We did try in good faith to incorporate the comments he had given us in no less than 4 previous meetings to discuss the project design. Meetings he had directly with my clients and then ultimately with myself as well. Next slide, please. So the maximum TDSF on this property is 8,047 square feet. We previously were proposing 7,590 square foot. We've reduced the overall size of the house down to 6,396 square feet. I think we've done a really good faith effort here. Next slide, please. We would point out that the total development square footage of 6,396 square foot is pretty significantly less than what Mr. Stockwell has on his property right next door, which is 7,197 square foot. And we would point out that the city did give significant accommodations to Mr. Stockwell. He was given a site plan review. He was given a minor modification for the front yard reduction of 50%. We haven't been asking for any front yard setbacks or any other setback modifications from this commission whatsoever. Next slide, please. The average second story in the area is 1,842 square foot. Ironically, in the first Planning Commission hearing, Commissioner Craig Hill had indicated to me that if we could substantiate that the second story was more consistent with what was in the neighborhood, that he'd be supportive of it. And this commission has oftentimes allowed a larger square footage than the average, just so long as you don't go too far. But we are right there down the line with the average for what you have in the neighborhood for the second story. Next slide, please. And our numbers are predicated upon building permits, coastal development permits, the assessor jackets. Next slide, please. The three houses which you can see right here highlighted, we have actual building permits for them. We know that the numbers are accurate. We know that the second story as designed is consistent with the neighborhood average. Next slide, please. Look, the project complies with the municipal code and the LCP development standards. We're not cavalier about the concerns of Mr. Stockwell, far, far from it. But at the end of the day, what is controlling and supposed to be the basis of review and approval is whether or not the project comports with the development standards. It cannot be a popularity contest, and a next door neighbor cannot have veto power over an application in front of the city. 3 out of the 5 houses on this street are already 2-story. 13 out of the 23 properties in the surrounding neighborhood are 2-story. The project second story has been revised from 3,034 square foot down to just 1,800 square foot and change. That hurt. We didn't like doing that, but we did it because that was the direction that the city gave us. That was the direction that the council gave us, and that was the direction that the commission gave us. We thought we had done a project design that was very sensitive, and you couldn't see much of that second story from a public viewing area, that being Gray Fox itself. Nonetheless, we were told to go and modify it, and we did. And a big chunk of that reduction was on that second story on the northerly prolongation, which it doesn't seem we're getting much credit from our neighbor from. A big part of that reduction was a total elimination of a bedroom on the easterly side of the tower. That portion, which was on the second story closest to Mr. Stockwell's property, which both orally and in writing, he has conveyed to the city and to us, the portion of the second story that he found most offensive. The project's second story has been reduced by 40%. We've made multiple modifications to the project. We've met with Mr. Stockwell 7 times in 4 years. I think it ought to be noted that the project has been designed and redesigned, and in no small part at the urging of Mr. Stockwell and to try and assuage his concerns. My clients are aware that they're going to be next door neighbors. They're not trying to prove who's right. They just want to build their house. They've been at this for 4 years now, if you include the design phase where they originally engaged with Mr. Stockwell and internally did the redesign before they even applied it to the city. At the end of the day, they should be allowed to build their home. Mr. Atwell has spent over $100,000 on redesigning this project with the architect. That's a lot of money. And he's done it in part to assuage the concerns of Mr. Stockwell, and also in part to assuage the concerns of the decision makers at the city. The latest redesign, which we heard for the first time in our last video conference meeting with Mr. Stockwell, would completely destroy the utility of the second story. It would cut it up, it wouldn't flow. Mr. and Mrs. Atwell both want to have a nice bedroom adjacent to each other on the second story. We simply cannot have a nice second story house and redesign it again the way that Mr. Stockwell wants us to. Additionally, it would increase the visibility of the second story as seen from the street, Gray Fox. It would widen out the width of the second story, which is the public view shed. And so we just don't think that that is supportable, and our clients made the decision that they've spent enough money, they've spent enough time, they're prepared to go forward, and they're very hopeful that you will follow the staff recommendation, finding the project consistent with the LCP and the municipal code, and you will grant us our approval tonight. I thank you for your time, and I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Schmitz. With that, do we have any other public speakers, Kathleen?
We do not.
Okay, then I'll close the public hearing, and it's back up here to the commissioner's discussion. Any thoughts on this one? Don't all jump at once, I guess, huh?
Before I get to the specifics of this, I want to apologize to both parties here, to Mr. Stockwell, Mr. Atwell. You know, this process stinks. And sometimes, you know, the result is that you're going to have, it's a zero-sum situation. Someone's going to be happy and someone's not. But as a planning, as a vehicle for trying to help people understand what can be done, the Planning Commission is not able to do that job because of the way we have been sort of mandated by the City Council and because of the way the municipal code works. We can't give guidance and predictability because there's so much subjectivity in this process. Concepts like neighborhood character, like mansionization, like Malibu's rural character, it's in the eyes of the beholder, and we can't tell you in advance, which we should be able to do, and which the staff should be able to do, what you need to do to get a project approved. And you need no better example of that than the 6 projects that came before the Planning Commission in 2019, 2020, the 6 projects that the Planning Commission denied the staff report, all 6 of them were reversed by the City Council. So we have no clear ability to help you, which is horrible. And for that, I apologize. And I eventually, hopefully, the City Council will get around to making some changes that will make things more concrete that now are very subjective. I gotta say, this one is just so unfortunate. I agree. It would be nice if everyone could do things that make both parties happy. And here that's not the case. My personal view is locating the second story as far away from the property line as they have. The fact that there aren't windows in Mr. Stockwell's property that look out on Mr. Atwell's proposed building. The fact that it does comply with all of the requirements the staff has laid out in the report. And the fact that I think you have a tough time saying that it is, excuse me if I'm disagreeing with various council people, neighborhood character when you have 13 out of 23 houses with a second floor, including 3 on the same street. And they're located, in this case, as I said, as far away from the subject property that's complaining that you can get. I don't know, other than letting the neighbor design what this house should be, which isn't the way private property rights work. I think that Mr. Atwell has done what needs to be done to get the property approved. So I'm sorry to come to that conclusion for Mr. Stockwell's sake. And I understand all the arguments that you made, but that's my view of this.
Thank you, Commissioner Weil. Commissioner Jennings, any thoughts?
Sure. Just doing a little back of the envelope calculation, I realize that I've been hearing these arguments or a variation of these arguments twice a month for the last 26 years. It's not uncommon that neighboring property owners do not like to see a house built. It is really not uncommon. Nobody likes to see the possibility of a neighbor being able to look down into your backyard. I wouldn't like it. Nobody would like it. Every city council wants people to arrive at an agreement, to get together and work it out. I can remember some early cases where the idea was where the house could be built, and well, you could put it here, but this neighbor didn't like it, so maybe if you move it down, now wait a minute, this other neighbor didn't like that, and now what if we move it down here? So you had houses being shifted around from place to place until you got to the least common or the least offensive position, which of course would have nothing to do with what the property owner wanted. City councils want to have people come to an agreement because city councils are politicians. This is good reason. This is one of the real reasons why we have a planning commission, is so that the electeds don't have to annoy people, one side or the other, by making a decision. But it's impossible to put that as a criteria that has to be achieved in order to say you can build your house. You got to have everybody in the neighborhood agree with your design. And that's not what the law requires. It's not what our code requires. What our code talks about is not just impact on the neighbors or impact on the neighborhood. It talks about an adverse impact on the neighborhood character. Now, we all know that's a completely formless idea, and really it was thrown in there for the purpose of allowing a sort of an escape route for the city council or planning commissioner in the case of something that was really egregious and just not conforming with what had otherwise been built in the neighborhood. And so each of us has to come up with our own standard since we haven't been provided with one. And you know, some of us look at square footage, some of us look at bulk and mass. And each of those standards is equally legitimate, I guess, if because we haven't been provided with anything more specific. But the way I look at it, I see this project being consistent with the size and the orientation of the other houses that have been built already on this street. It doesn't stand out. As a matter of fact, it's hidden more than other houses on the street. So my analysis is that does not create a negative impact on neighborhood character. And I realize, you know, Mr. Stockwell, it has a negative impact on you. It has a negative impact on your sense of privacy and the feeling you'll have about your home, and that's terrible. I thought at the time, I was thinking, you know, what we really ought to do is just have the two parties agree to allow a line of Italian cypresses to be grown down the property line between them. And yeah, it wouldn't meet the city codes, but if nobody cares, nobody cares. I have to say that, you know, it's a tough situation. It's a tough decision because somebody is going to be impacted and their lives are going to be impacted. But I have to say that I cannot see really a legitimate argument that this proposed structure has a deleterious or negative impact on the character of this neighborhood. So I'm going to support the staff recommendation.
Commissioner Euring, your thoughts? You're muted. There you go.
I am amazed the two people that are as smart as Mr. Wild and Mr. Jennings can't conceive of what neighborhood character looks like. And, you know, I mean, they're right. It is subjective. Different people disagree on what it's supposed to be, but the concept seems to be pretty clear. All right. You've got a neighborhood that you're trying to maintain. And in trying to maintain that neighborhood, you want some consistency of what's being built. Now, this lack of neighborhood character and what it's doing to our city is something we ought to think about. You know, as opposed to if we're building 9,000 square foot houses in neighborhoods that didn't have those houses before, those are not starter homes for families, right? And the result of that is what you see in the school district today. The Malibu High School's got less than 1,000 students. And coming up the line, there's only 300 or 600 kids in between Webster and Point Dume. So it's not a question of if we're going to have a separate school district. The question is, are you going to have a school? All right. And from my perspective, all right, I like a city that has a school because at some point in time I want to sell my house, I've got a bigger population of people that may want to buy that than if I've only got this little group where there's no school in it. So the fact that it's difficult for them to understand what neighborhood character is, and the fact that, you know, this deal that says, as long as I get whatever the last house we dealt with on Cuthbert, you know, there were a bunch of letters from people that said, I think this house really looks good, except when you took a look at the letters, most of those came from people that didn't live on Cuthbert, right? I mean, see, when you look at the stuff, you really got to do the work underneath it to figure out who's saying what it means. All that said, you know, I don't know how you get neighbors to work with one another. You know, whatever psychology courses I took in college, I mean, I sat through them probably because I was trying to date some woman who was also in that class with me. All right. So I didn't learn much from those things. I do think in this case that the applicant has made a reasonable attempt to try and deal with the concerns of his neighbor. I don't think you're ever going to get both parties, at least listening to this, I don't think we're ever going to get both of these parties to agree. And this is going to go back to the city council. No doubt in my mind. Somebody's going to take it back there and they'll figure it out at that end. So at this point, I think we've delayed this long enough. I think I'm going to approve the project. And I apologize for Mr. Stockwell. I realize, look, and back to what Jeff said, I understand how nasty it is when someone builds something next to you that starts to impose upon whatever level of quality of life you have, all right? And it's really disappointing that those two guys can't work it out, but apparently it's not going to happen, so I'm going to vote to approve the project.
Thank you. I'll give my thoughts. What I find interesting in this one is kind of to a point Commissioner Jennings made in his comments. We have been talking about this neighborhood character on specific projects for months, you know, years, whatever it is, you know, from my experience, a few years here. And this is like one of the rare times where city council actually, when I played back this tape, I wanted to get as educated as I could on this. The discussion within the council was all focused on finding two does not affect neighborhood character. So that's where, you know, the city council was, you know, coming right back to that topic, and they were the guidance that they were, the consensus they were heading towards was that they weren't going to be able to find that, make that finding. And that was kind of where it turned, and the decision was, okay, let's bring it back, remand it back to the planning commission. So then if anyone can bring up slide 4, I think that's the best thing for me to kind of talk to this. Are we able to do that? Is anyone able to bring up slide 4? Renika, can you still work that magic? Because what I'm kind of struggling with now is actually a point Craig made very clear, Mr. Hill, I should say, and that's that when you look at that 2/3 rule, if the guidance from our code, which when you look at, you know, MMC 17, you know, 40.A.13 shall be oriented so as to minimize view blockage from adjacent properties. Now that flies completely counter to the logic which, you know, Mr. Schmitz presented, which is an orientation to minimize from the street, which is really kind of how I think generally kind of colloquially we've been interpreting this neighborhood character. How does it look when you drive down the street? But really that 2/3 rule, it's not talking about blocking a view of the ocean. It's just minimizing view blockage, like minimizing intrusion on that neighbor. So I also recognize that this is kind of a, it's just that we're in a situation where direction is not that clear. My tendency, because this is the first time I can recall where city council has sent us the message that, hey, we align with your observation that this does adversely impact neighborhood character. I tend to want to directly send it back to city council by a denial. That would be where I tend to vote. I as Commissioner Jennings like to say, I can do the math. So I don't know that would be anything much more than a symbolic vote, but I do find it interesting, and I just wanted to point out that this is one of the times where city council has stood up and said, hey, this does appear to impact neighborhood character. I'm not sure if this 2/3 exhibit on slide 4 is not going to be enough evidence to say, oh, no longer impacts neighborhood character, we're going to let it go through. Or it's going to be more like, no, that's what I didn't like about this. That is exactly what I wanted to have addressed, because it's still blocking that view. It's still, you know, impacting neighborhood character because it's impacting that view blockage as outlined in that section of the code. So I'm inclined to vote against staff recommendation for that reason, because that's what I interpret from the direction I take away from council. So with that little diatribe, I'm guessing we're towards a motion.
I have a motion.
Excellent.
I'd like to move that we approve the staff report and adopt the well, I'll let them get into all of
Recommendation.
17043 staff recommendation.
Excellent. Do we have a second?
I got a question. What's a 2-2 vote get us, Trevor?
More debate.
Huh?
More debate. So
No. Does it pass or does it fail?
Fails.
we have, I mean, it would fail, but our direction here is to continue to debate the issue. I mean, we're to come to a.
No. If we vote 2-2, the motion to approve the project fails, right? Period.
And it's essentially disapproved and will probably then go back to the city.
And then the other side is you wouldn't be able to get consensus on a motion to deny. So then we're stuck again.
Where do we stop? If it's 2-2 vote, it's denied, and then it goes to the city council, right?
It's not denied. There's no motion to motion to deny, and a motion to deny wouldn't pass either. So you just get no result. I don't know how it gets back up to the city council. I assume we would have to go there, but.
Okay, but what, so if it's a 2-2 vote, can Atwell build this project? No. I'm sorry, Trevor, go ahead. I'm just trying to understand.
No, they won't have an approval if basically you're sitting in a deadlock situation. If you can't get a motion to approve or you can't get a motion to deny. So we would continue the debate, see if there's more information that could lead to us getting a resolution that everyone could agree on.
When you say we're going to continue the debate, you mean it comes back to the planning commission?
Or you could continue and get more information from staff, or we could continue discussion here tonight to try to reach a resolution.
But we've got to hit something where we vote 3-1 on it.
Or if we vote 2-2 and we say, we're not going to get any more definition out of the applicant or the appellant, and we got what we got, and we've got to either decide what we want to do with that, and it comes out with a 2-2 vote, what happens?
Well, if we can't reach a resolution, then we would have to vote to send this to the council and advise them that you're not able to reach a consensus on this item.
So a 2-2 vote automatically assures it goes to the council. Is that what you're saying?
That'd be the only way to get a resolution here.
I'm just asking, is that what you're saying? If we vote 2-2, it automatically goes to the city council?
If we vote 2-2, I think we should explore it. We should answer questions. We can discuss what Commissioner Marks was talking about in terms of views, because I wasn't aware that we even had any view issues, that were raised in this.
Trevor, take me through around the mulberry bush. Real simple question. If we vote 2 people for it, 2 people against it, and we say we're done, based upon where we are right now, we're not going to solve the discussion between Atwell and Mr. Stock. We're not going to solve that. And those 2 guys aren't going to get together and have a bottle of beer and figure it out by themselves. So we have different agreement. So we say it's 2-2. That's what we finally decided. We don't want to talk about it anymore because we've all thought about all the stuff we got to talk about. What happens then?
Then the suggestion would be that you direct staff to you put together a resolution to the city council stating that you're not able to reach a resolution. You recommend that it returns to the city council.
Does it automatically go to the city council? That's my question.
Yeah, if you're able to reach a resolution to 3-1 to send this to the council, that we can't
Trevor,
deadlock on the situation.
It's a 2-2 vote. If we vote 2-2, does it go to the city council automatically?
What I'm saying is, my suggestion is you can't reach a vote. If you're 2-2 on whether to approve, 2-2 on whether to deny, then you can try to put together a resolution directing it to go to the council to say you can't reach a resolution. You tried a motion for, you tried a motion against. There was no resolution on it, and that you're asking the council to assume the.
Okay, so the courtroom dramas where the jury comes in and says, Your Honor, we're hung, and the judge says, go back and argue some more. That's what Trevor's playing the judge here, is sending it back and saying, go back and try to resolve it, go back and try to resolve it.
Yeah, but we're not going to
What-
argue anymore. I'm
What's
just-
happened before when we've hit 2-2? Did then, was there that the commission then had to form another motion, or was it just that it automatically went? I know I'm kind of reiterating Steve's point, but sorry, Commissioner Watt, go ahead.
No,
Commissioner Watt.
I'm a lawyer, but not that kind of lawyer. But I mean, it seems to me if we don't pass something that allows the applicant to move forward, and 2-2 would not allow the applicant to move forward, then the applicant has the right to appeal to the city council. But he doesn't have to, but by going 2-2, we effectively stop the progress of the applicant to move forward with the project. And then the burden, it seems to me, is on the applicant to go to the city council and say, it wasn't approved by the planning commission. I want you to approve it.
The other option is if one of the commissioners chose to abstain for some reason, then that would break the tie. If someone hadn't formed an opinion or needed whatever the basis would be for an abstention, that's another path.
While we're thinking about that, I'll make a couple of remarks in response to what Chris had to say. First of all, you're right. I'll pick up on what Trevor was saying. A oriented so as to protect views is not the same as oriented to protect a view down onto somebody's property. We don't typically have any statutory preference for or any statutory provision that allows protection of privacy or private views. And so you're kind of looking at the reverse of view when you talk about protecting a view, because there is nobody's made an argument that there's a view up the hill or down the hill that is protected. The other thing is that that you have to remember is that the city council allowed it to come back to the planning commission on the idea that the applicant was going to redesign the project. And you're right, I guess. I didn't look at the hearing of what happened at the city council, but everybody says that it looked as though it was on its way toward denial. They sent it back to be redesigned. Well, that did happen. I mean, it did come back and it did get redesigned, and who's to know what the city council's attitude would be. But the thing that troubles me more about the whole thing is the disconnect between the city council and the staff and the planning commission, because we found ourselves in this situation. I mean, look, in those 26 years, I did learn how the process worked. The city council tells the city manager what to do. City manager tells the planning director what to do. Planning staff does what they're told to do, and it comes down to us, and we say, no, that's not right. And at the same time, it should be coming down from the city council telling us, what are the people who appoint us want us to do. But we continually, week after week, find ourselves in this conflict where planning commission staff comes in and says, or not planning commission staff, planning staff comes forward and says, this is our recommendation. And we say, no, that's not what the rule is. That's not what the law ought to be. I'm not going to argue with the rights or wrongs of it. I'm just saying it's a bad public policy or bad public practice to have that disconnect. I hope that at some point in the future, it will be remedied and everybody will get on the same page one way or the other. But right now, it doesn't seem to be that we're able to do that.
Well, that's one of the reasons I'm looking at the 2-2 vote that says, send it back to the city council. Maybe their decision will give us better definition of what the heck we should be doing. Right? Maybe we can learn something from that. Look, I understand the process Jeff is talking about that says, the planning commission is supposed to do what the city council tells them to do. And, that's maybe why we voted for 12-foot walls covered in foliage that are open space and a traffic study that traffic hasn't increased for 25 years. But that's wrong. That's not, if you were smart people and doing what's best for the city, that's not what we should be doing. So I'm going to go with a 2-2 vote. Let's send it back to the city council, see what the hell they come up with.
So how about we have the vote on what we've got motioned and seconded, and then we can get advice from Trevor as to what we need to do to get to the next phase.
Back to the city council, yes.
Yeah, so Trevor, any thoughts? That makes sense?
Okay, so we have a motion for staff's, to approve staff's recommendation from Commissioner Whale, and do we have a second?
Second by Commissioner Jennings.
Okay, can we do a roll call vote, Chairman?
Kathleen? Oh, yeah, Kathleen, roll call vote, please. Thank you.
Commissioner Weil,
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Vice Chair Marks,
No.
Commissioner Euring.
No.
Okay, so motion fails. So now what?
Is there another motion?
I mean, we can go back and forth on this. I mean,
Another motion.
Yeah, Steve
Need a
can do that
motion.
on his own.
Right.
Motion is to deny the project. So if someone makes a motion to deny the project, we can see if we're deadlocked on that as well.
Okay, Steve, do you have any motion to make?
I'll make a motion to deny the project.
I'll second. Okay, can we, do we want to have any more discussion on this for denial? I mean, I gave,
What's the basis for denial?
so the basis is as I outlined from, again, that slide 4 presentation. And, you know, I'll just point out, you know, Commissioner Jennings called out the point, we don't have good clarity on neighborhood character. I'm seeing this as a message from council that they're saying this project clearly doesn't meet neighborhood character, redesign it. In looking at the illustrations that are representing that redesign, I don't know that that meets the need for neighborhood character as envisioned by the council when they made, you know, brought it back to us. So that's my position on this. So again, not allowing forward for finding 2.
So the motion is to deny for failure to inability to make the finding that it complies with the neighborhood character. Is that correct?
Yeah,
correct.
And right, and you know, it didn't really accomplish the conversation the city council wanted to have between the applicant and the appellant, right? There was supposed to be they were looking for some agreement, and that didn't occur.
So as far as code goes, finding 2, as far as direct direction to us as the commission, we were asked to try to find the middle ground, which was not found.
Right.
I believe that if I could just add, I believe the council's direction was to reduce the second floor to be more consistent with the neighborhood character, and the applicant actually has done that. So it was, to the extent that neighborhood character is involved, that's done. It seems that it's a separate issue whether the neighbor is satisfied with the result of that, but the applicant's actually done, although it took a little while, what the council asked for, which was reduce the size of the second floor and confer with the neighbor.
I completely agree. My concern is that the fact that they backed assessment of a neighborhood character and bringing it back to us, that since the the impact to the neighbors on either side hasn't really changed much. That's when I look at that slide 4, I just don't know what, because the way that the rules aren't clear here. So that's the best that I can interpret what's in front of us.
Can I just cut to the Can I cut to the chase? You're saying, rightly or wrongly, that whatever efforts they made to address the neighborhood's character issue wasn't enough, and therefore, in your assessment, they have not met council's criteria to change the project sufficiently to comply with neighborhood character.
I'm saying, I think personally that they're really close, but I don't know, because the way that this was debated by the council itself leaves questions in my head, like, did this really meet what they were looking for?
But I'm sorry, don't mean to interrupt.
No, that's the full stop. You go ahead.
We can't sit here and try to second guess what the various people there meant us to do. Even if we have specific discussions with them, we can only use our best judgment as to what it is, in our opinion, that the project represents. And it's either enough or it's not enough to meet the neighborhood character requirement. The fact that council said it needs to be better, you're saying, and I'm not arguing with you, you're saying it's not better enough, which is fine.
That's in terms of reading what little direction we have in this neighborhood character concept. In this case, that's where I stand. Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember too, that the city council relies on the planning commission to be experts on the code, and what's before you is to be able to make the findings, whether the project complies with all of the development standards. And, it's been revised to reduce the size of the second floor. It meets the 2/3 rule. It meets all of the other development standards. So that's one way to simplify it, is that it meets all the development standards, and it is going to, I think we'd all be willing to bet that it's going to end up before the city council, whether it gets approved or
Right.
not.
Right.
The view is code compliance in terms of making the findings.
Yeah, I would like to jump in on that, because we're not trying to, at least I'm not, I don't think we should be trying to say, well, in this case, this is what the city council wants. In that case, this is what the city council wants. If the city council said, in order to avoid an impact on neighborhood character, it has to be painted orange and pink, it would be perfectly within our job description to say, no, that has nothing to do with it. We make the decision because that's the discretion that is put in our hands. All right. And it really doesn't matter what the city council says, except to the extent that when it goes on appeal, we'll either be upheld or will be turned over or overturned. But really, it's our job to apply the standard as we see it, not as we think they see it. That's all I want to say.
Well, but we go back through the process that says, and both you and David have said, how do you define neighborhood character? All right. We now have an opportunity to have the city council give us a little more definition of what they think neighborhood character is. And I think if we can get that from them as we move forward in other decisions on the planning commission, it makes our decision process a little bit easier.
Well,
one second, Trevor.
I'm sorry.
I'm just going to point out that Don Schmitz has raised his hand. You may want to see if they want an opportunity to redesign or to.
Yeah, let's hear what Commissioner Jennings has there. Go ahead, Commissioner Jennings.
Yeah, I don't think that if it goes back to the city council and the city council says, yeah, not enough, that doesn't really tell me anything. It doesn't tell me anything by which I should change my standard of judging what impact there is on neighborhood character or not. At one point, it looked like the city council was going to go in the way of saying, okay, fine, we're going to do a strict numerical standard on that. And frankly, that didn't persuade me either, because neighborhood character is the way we see it, we individually see it. If they changed the statute and said, okay, here's the numbers, that would have been different. That would, obviously completely different. But I don't think that case by case decisions because situations are so different. If the next house is going to be oriented catty corner, is that going to, how are we going to apply this then? I mean, it doesn't. I don't think it's going to give us anything that we can apply in future cases. I guess that's the bottom line.
Well, see, I disagree. I think it does reconfirm the fact that there is a concept of neighborhood character. It is subjective, all right, but it's something we should think about as we go through and look at these houses. That's what it's telling me. That we shouldn't just throw it out the door because it's not fully defined and it isn't measured in the number of square. But it says, look, what you're trying to do is make sure that the community has some structure to it and that there are neighborhoods, and we're trying to protect those. And we're trying to protect not only the right of the person who wants to build the house, but the person who's living next door.
And nobody disagrees with what you're saying. Nobody disagrees with that. I mean, it's just how you apply it.
Exactly right.
Commissioner Weil.
We're all saying versions of the same thing.
Yeah.
Part of this that troubles me so much and makes me feel so bad for the applicants is we before I got here and then was doing this, we on 6 occasions used our judgment as to what constitutes neighborhood character to turn down projects And 6 out of 6 times, the city council overruled us and said we were wrong. So we're obviously not on the same page with the policymakers who are the ones charged with determining what these laws should be. And they've got to fix it because we're just bouncing around.
And we're giving them, this gives them a chance to help us define it better.
Right. That's how I see it, is that this is one of the rare cases where the council's message back was, this deserves a second look, take another look.
Did we get a motion to deny?
The motion is on the table. I was just gonna.
Let's take a vote.
Yeah, I
Why,
agree.
you wanted Don Schmitz to, were you going to recognize?
Well, the concern I have, I think this is pretty,
yeah, this is
significantly an internal debate, I think.
No, I only meant in the event that they want to withdraw the project. Do we want to give them that right before we take these votes?
If you want to give an opportunity to
it's fair.
to continue the hearing to bring more information or a revision or whatever, if you want to give them the opportunity to do that, we shouldn't reopen the debate. But if you want to give them that opportunity, or you could take.
Thank you. Good point. I stand corrected. We should hear what Mr. Smith has to say. So if we could
Remarks, commissioners, no, we do not wish to withdraw the project, but before I say anything else, Chair Marks, I can very quickly give a couple salient facts, which I think are important for the deliberations.
I think at this point, all we just wanted to see if you had any opinion on.
Well, there's a basic sense of fairness here in regards to what's going on, Chair Marks, and we were specifically told by the city attorney, go back to the planning commission.
Understood. Yeah.
Unless you want to get
Mr. Schmitz. Yeah, I think we're you can see where our debate is going. I think we'll keep with the information we have so far. Thank you for that, though. Let's have a vote on this one. If you could call the roll.
The motion to deny for inability to make the finding for
correct
character.
Yeah.
Commissioner Euring,
Yes.
Vice Chair Marks,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Jennings,
Nope.
Commissioner Weil,
Nope.
Okay. So Trevor, what do you advise here?
Where do we go from here?
So at this point, I would recommend that you vote to have staff prepare a resolution that states the facts that you unable to reach your decision on this, and recommend that the city council pick up the project and take jurisdiction, take the appeal back to the city council for a determination, since the planning commission is unable to make a decision one way or the other. And is there any information or anything that would change your minds or that could be helpful in making your decision tonight that could be brought back tonight or at a future period of time for any of you commissioners?
No.
Mm-mm.
No. No.
Okay.
I'll make the motion Trevor just gave us that said we want to send it back to the city council.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will second it, but I have a question I want to ask Trevor. Is there any, I'm just trying to think of whether there's a path in the municipal code or the LIP that allows the city council on its own motion to take back jurisdiction of something that has been sent to us. I just don't want to create a further limbo situation by having somebody argue that, oh, no, city council can't take this back.
No, we're making a memorialization that we're deadlocked at this point in time, and that this was an appeal that was sent back to the commission. And since we're not able to provide the advice and make a determination on this project, we're asking them to take the appeal back up and do have a hearing on that.
Okay, so is this a motion? Is this a resolution that's going to have to come back to this body before?
I don't think there's any need. If you're comfortable with the chair reviewing that.
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
We had 2 votes. It was deadlocked. There was no information that could be provided, and then ask the city council to take the project up.
I can live with
Makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, then I'll second the motion then.
Great. Do we need to repeat that, Trevor? Or you just write up what as far as what you have there, you're good for the language?
Okay, so Commissioner Euring, then the motion is to direct staff to prepare a resolution stating the facts that I have previously laid out, that we had 2 votes, that there is a deadlock, that you're unable to come to a resolution asking the council to take up the matter, and then ask for the chair to sign that and send that to the council.
Yes.
Great. Can we have a roll call?
Can I just ask that it be done
Yeah.
as expeditiously as possible, since these people have been in this limbo state for a very long time?
Agreed.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Let's get it up there as quick as we can.
That's why I recommend not bringing it back before the commission. There doesn't seem to be a need
Yeah,
for that.
let's get it up there as fast as we can.
Yep.
Commissioner Euring,
Yes.
Commissioner Weil,
Yes.
Commissioner Jennings,
Yes.
Vice Chair Marks,
Yes.
motion
Can we have a
carries.
motion to adjourn? Anyone feel
Motion
like
to
that?
adjourn.
All right. Have a great couple of weeks, guys.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone.